Felicity and Aim, mage and demon, master and servant, prisoner and jailer, stood us up. Twice. In truth, the two false starts in Felicity's journey down to Sherrowford obviously had everything to do with Aim and very little to do with Felicity. Whatever else one might say about Felicity, whatever sins and horrors she had committed in earlier life, whatever dark alliances and deals she'd made, it was plain to me that she would never willingly leave Evelyn waiting for help. This was all Aim's doing, I had little doubt of that. It was a very effective tactic, the last thing we'd been worrying about, and it drove Evelyn up the wall. The drive from Felicity's manor house up in Cumbria was meant to take a little under 3 hours, accounting for traffic, a stop on the M6 motorway, the need to skirt around Manchester, the changeable mood of Felicity's battered old Range Rover, and some kind of unpredictable complexity involved in actually leaving the surroundings of her home. She had tried to explain that last point, but had rapidly dissolved into a string of half-understood esoteric terminology, which would probably have made sense only to Evelyn. Felicity hadn't been in much of a state to go into detail at the end of our previous phone call, sitting on the floor and recovering from her horrible, tortured weeping. But she had promised to call Rain's phone early the following morning, to give us advance warning of when she was leaving, and when we might expect her. The 4-minute warning, Evelyn snorted that morning. Fantastic. We'll all huddle together in the cellar and wait for the blast wave, shall we? Evie, I sighed, though gently and indulgently. I'm sure it'll be a lot longer than 4 minutes. Felicity is taking this seriously. We'll have hours to prepare. Evelyn cleared her throat and blushed faintly. It's a joke, Heather. Duck and cover, said Preem. Felicity had made the same journey in a similar window once before, back when I'd called her for help during our crisis with the Sherrowford cult, when Rain had been kidnapped and Evie had lain helpless in a coma. She'd had far less prep time for that drive, but also the extra motivation of a real emergency. Evelyn's life had been at stake. Perhaps that had encouraged her to quite literally step on the gas, or perhaps, more worryingly, it had motivated Aim to not muck about and get in the way. But on that first morning after the phone call, Evelyn's fears appeared to be crystallizing into reality. 9 o'clock came and went without any word from Felicity, not even a text message. Her mobile phone would apparently work once she was on the road, after all. Then 10 o'clock passed as well, then 11, the hour hand creeping round on the old grandfather clock which stood in our front room. Time slowed to an awful, torturous plod. Rain sent Felicity a text message, then called her twice, both the landline phone and the mobile phone number she'd given us. Both times, nothing. The calls rang and rang, answered by nothing but the void. Evelyn had already struggled to eat breakfast that morning, racked by anxiety gnawing at her guts. Preem had pulled out all the stops, made bacon and scrambled eggs and fried mushrooms. Rain had wolfed her portion down, Sevens had happily chomped away, Tenny and Lozzie had briefly appeared and joined in too, even Zheng had complimented the bacon, which was rare. She preferred her meat raw and bloody. But Evie herself had managed only a few bites before complaining of nausea and retreating to the safety of cold porridge. I ended up finishing her portion for her. As the hours wore on, she found it harder and harder to hide her nerves. She sat in the kitchen, pretending to read but actually doing nothing, rubbing and worrying at the old scarring on her maimed hand. I'd never seen her do that before. She usually didn't fiddle with her maimed fingers and palm, or draw any attention to it at all. She got up eventually, stomped around the house in wordless irritation, left mugs of tea to grow cold, and spoke in monosyllabic grunts. She barely even heard what was said to her. I couldn't watch her like that. It hurt. She'd been so happy and fulfilled last night. The previous evening, Evie and I had sat up until long past midnight, watching her pony cartoon together. It had been absolutely delightful, even if some of the context of the show was a little lost on me. Evie sometimes laughed at things that I didn't understand, or gestured at the screen for moments that seemed quite mundane, but I felt like I started to get it after a while. At first she'd acted quite embarrassed when I'd asked which character was her favorite. She had refused to answer for another 3 episodes, then ventured the truth while awkwardly looking away from my face. "You mean, the one that does magic?" I'd said, trying not to sound too shocked. I assumed with all the being a mage in real life, I assumed you wouldn't." Yes. I know. Don't you dare repeat this to Rain, I'll never hear the end of it. I've always had to be quite clear to her that I do not identify with the magical cartoon unicorn, so do not tell her I've been lying about that, Heather. Do not. I'd sworn myself to secrecy. Evelyn had finally relaxed after that, and began to share all sorts of details about this obscure and esoteric passion, though according to Evie it was anything but obscure. "It's a big deal on the internet," she said. "People draw art. They write fanfiction. There's a whole subculture." "Oh. Well. I wouldn't know, not really. Have you ever done that?" Evelyn had cleared her throat, staring at me in a frozen state. "You mean write fanfiction? Or draw art? Either or. It sounds really exciting." "No," she said, too quickly. "No, I don't. Never done that." Preem had stuck around for a few episodes of Magical Ponies and the occasional sparkling unicorn, but then she'd left me and Evie alone together. Rain had stuck her head in briefly, then left in wordless glee, shooting us a thumbs up and going off to play video games about girls with improbably large bosoms beating each other up. Kimberly had ambled past on her way to the kitchen at almost 11 at night, overheard some very distinctive bits of dialogue, and knocked on the door, much to our surprise. Kimberly, timid Kim who so often scurried about the place like she wanted us to forget she existed, had stood in the doorway with bloodshot eyes and a dazed smile, and nodded her heartfelt and touched approval that we were getting into the ponies at last. Yes, well, Evelyn had said, guarded and short in snapping, mostly from embarrassment, though perhaps also a little worried about being interrupted yet again. "Heather's never seen it before. That's all." Normally, Kim would have jumped out of her skin at being spoken to like that, then scurried off in terror, but right then she was high enough to start a new career as a cosmonaut. She'd blinked at me in delighted surprise. "No shit, Heather. Aw, that's great. You're one of us now. Have fun, yeah, have fun." She'd clapped her hands twice, then bowed her way backwards out of the door, like she was giving thanks at a shrine. Maybe she had known that Evie was irritated, after all. After that, it had been just me and Evie for the rest of the night, leaning on each other, watching cartoon ponies having adventures. She'd seemed so happy. Eventually I'd tucked her into bed. But this following morning, waiting for a woman she hated, who might arrive at any moment, Evelyn was chewing herself to pieces. She couldn't stand the waiting and the not knowing. I couldn't stand what it was doing to her state of mind, her nerves, her well-being. Rain kept her own spirits up with that beaming grin, cracking jokes about how we were going to make Felicity sleep in a dog house in the garden, or how maybe we should all pretend to be out when she arrived. Preem stayed close to Evie, making sure she stayed hydrated, never leaving her alone. Sevens lurked in the shadows and around the door frames, but she couldn't do anything. I got the sense she wanted to help, but maybe couldn't find the right mask, the right role to play. I turned into a curtain-twitching maniac. I couldn't do anything to help Evie either. I tried to distract her but she was barely answering. So instead I lurked at the windows, trying to watch the road. I sent Ching out to stand covert sentry near the end of the street, but that was pointless, and boring for her, so it didn't last long. At one point I even opened the front door and stood there in my pajama bottoms and one of Rain's old black hoodies, staring down the street. I probably looked like a total madwoman, silently rehearsing the indignant rant I was going to deliver to Felicity as soon as she dared show her face. The weather was foul as foul could be. Summer had fled like a startled deer. Heavy rain clouds battered the city, drizzling and spitting and whipping with cold, but refusing to break into the clean rain of a proper storm. My teeth ached. My fingernails itched. My eyes hurt. Eventually, I asked out loud, is she causing this? I'd been staring out of the kitchen window. My eyes must have looked like dark pits of frustration. My tone brought Evelyn around for a few minutes, dragging her out of the stupor of anxiety. Heather. The weather, I explained. What? What are you talking about? The weather. It's cold, it's dark, it's so oppressive. Normally I'm more of an autumn sort of person anyway, but this feels wrong. Is this doing this at a distance? Don't be absurd, Evelyn grumbled, but her heart wasn't in it. Demons can't control the weather. Says you, Preem chimed from behind her. Evelyn snorted a single-knot laugh at that, a token effort of forced disbelief. What about mages? I asked. When I turned away from the window to gauge Evie's response, she'd seemed so small and sad and shrunken, sitting there on the other side of the kitchen table, thick shawl over her shoulders, with a book in front of her, pretending to read. A hardback copy of Frankenstein which looked about as old as the house. That wasn't a good book for her right now, she needed something light and fluffy, or at least something funny. A bit of Pratchett, maybe, but I wasn't sure if we had any in the house. I had a sudden urge to suggest I do a one-woman dramatic reading of A Midsummer Night's Dream for her, but then I dismissed the idea as absurd. The weather? Evelyn echoed, then sighed and drew a hand over her face. Why not? What do I know? Sure, maybe they're sending rain to irritate us. Maybe they're trying to ruin our harvest or make our bowstrings damp. Maybe we've been cursed by a rain god. Bugger it and let it rain. Evie, I sighed, feeling awkward all of a sudden. No, Heather, they're not controlling the bloody weather. You sound worse than I get. Stop being paranoid. Hypocritical of me to say, I know. She shrugged, eyes dropping back to the book. At least she wasn't actually reading it. At 3 minutes to midday, Felicity finally called. Unfortunately, Rain had stepped into the bathroom for a few minutes, leaving her phone on the table like a ticking bomb. When it went off I jumped out of my skin and almost slapped the thing to pieces with my tentacles. Evelyn flinched and scooted her chair back. Preem had enough presence of mind to scoop the phone up and press it to her shoulder. Rain skidded into the room 10 seconds later, sliding on her socks, stopping just short of Preem before accepting the phone. The rest of us could only hear one side of the rushed, chaotic conversation which ensued. Rain actually frowned in confusion, a rare look on her face. Hey Flissy, where the hell you at, girl, you hey, slow down. Slow down, you're talking too fast. Okay. Okawaye. Rain listened for a long moment, giving Evelyn and me a bemused look across the kitchen, eyebrows nodding together. Evelyn mouthed, "Is she here yet?" and Rain shook her head, which provoked Evelyn to throw up her arms in frustration. "So, you're leaving now, right?" Rain said into the phone. "Well, sure thing then, just let us know as soon as you're ready. No sweat, no blame, just let us know." "Cool. We okay?" "Okay, we're cool. No worries, Fliss, just stay in contact. Like we said." Rain held the phone up. She'd already cut the call. She's gonna phone back. Once she's in the car and on the road. Evie, hey, come on, take a deep breath. Just breathe for me, yeah. Just breathe. Crying, by the sounds of it, Rain said with a sigh. Held up by somebody having a little tantrum. A bad girl, Preem said. Oh, I can't believe this shit, Evelyn said. I bet she's loving this. She's found a way to torment me by not being present. We received 5 more phone calls from Felicity over the course of that afternoon, and not one of them was made from a moving car. She called us in a state of distress, apologetic and mortified, shocked, weeping with frustration, and then finally just broken with emotional exhaustion. Rain fielded all the calls, but it wasn't hard to overhear snatches of Felicity's distraught voice on the other end. I could imagine her scurrying through the half-empty, echoing hallways of that dark and void-like manor house, below the dripping boughs of an evil forest, the walls whipped by cold winds and menaced by dark, creeping ivy, her own footsteps swallowed up by rotten wood and crumbling furniture, in pursuit of a tormentor that would not let her leave. But that was only my imagination. Maybe AIM had just hidden her car keys. Whatever was truly happening up in Cumbria, the final phone call at 6:45 in the evening was the last straw for Evelyn. I heard a pitiful whimper from the other end of the phone, before Rain managed to step out of the room to make real alternative arrangements. In a way, I didn't blame Evelyn, though I like to think I would have phrased my irritation with a little bit more tact. I also probably wouldn't have muttered the absolutely unspeakable insults she strung together under her breath afterward, as Preem helped her sit back down. We'd done nothing all day except wait, but I felt utterly exhausted, yet without the clean ache of overexerted muscles and the dull thrum of a humming cardiovascular system. My tri-lobe bioreactor could do nothing to soothe this particular kind of drawn-out weariness. Rain reappeared a couple of minutes later and cleared her throat awkwardly before relating the new plan. Flissy is gonna try again tomorrow morning. No promises, though. We should probably prep for the worst. Maybe buy a deck of cards and settle in. The joke did not go down well. Evelyn looked about ready to bite the head off a live chicken, or crumble to dust. With an unspoken agreement of shared glances and covert gestures, Preem, Rain, and I all set about making sure Evelyn didn't slip further into a deep pit of depression and loathing. When AIM arrived, she was going to need all her wits about her, even if I was going to be glued to her side like a bodyguard for her soul. I don't know how Preem did it. Demon hands were apparently dexterous enough to avoid hurting Evelyn's warped shoulders and kinked spine. Sevens reappeared from somewhere too, taking up her seat close to Evie, though she didn't have anything much to say. I think I was the only one who noticed how focused she was, as if watching Evelyn for a sign of something. Zheng went out hunting. Perhaps that was her way of helping, returning with a brace of dead squirrels for the unlucky pack member. Rain went out too, to fetch a takeaway curry for dinner. We hadn't actually had one in a while. Evie needed treats, even if she wouldn't admit so. Lozzie and Tenny ventured down from upstairs at long last. They'd spent most of the day staying out of the way, though I had noticed Lozzie eavesdropping from behind door frames at least twice, her face peering out just above Sevens. Apparently she could be very quiet and sneaky when she wanted to be. Tenny instantly picked up that Auntie Evie needed help. I don't know if it was some extrasensory knowledge, some product of her non-human biology, or merely the intuition of a child. Tenny crept across the kitchen exactly like a nervous child approaching a grumpy parent, puff-faced and serious, tentacles reeled and close, until Evie did a double-take at her and then just stared, grumpy and exhausted. Tenny stared back with her big shiny black pelagic eyes. Lozzie peered around from behind her. Tenny hadn't gained any additional height since her hatching several months earlier, but her straight-backed, oh-so-serious pose made her seem more mature than Lozzie, at least more mature than she'd ever looked before. All of her poses and gestures still held that strange, alien note to them, despite her basic humanoid body plan, her 2 arms and 2 legs, her eyes and jaw and lips and chin and facial muscles, and her healthy upright torso, though I wasn't certain she possessed a spine, not exactly. It was often hard to tell with Tenny where human influence ended and pneumosomatic heritage began. She was plainly not Homo sapiens, with her silken, coal-black skin, her wings hanging down her back like a cloak, her mass of tentacles that crept up and out from their hidden origin points in her shoulders, but at the same time her gestures and mannerisms were so very human, so very us. As she stood opposite Evie's exhausted anger, she obviously empathized. "Tenny," I whispered gently. "Auntie Evie isn't feeling so good right now. Please don't," I tried to say please don't bother her, but I couldn't get the words out. Tenny wouldn't understand. She might be hurt. "Auntie," Tenny said in her fluttery trill voice. It was not a question. Lozzie whispered from behind her too, gently tugging on a tentacle. "Tenny." Evelyn sighed, squeezed her eyes shut, and grunted an affirmative. "Yes, that would be me." Auntie Evie. Hello, Tenny. I'm not mad at you, it's okay. Mad because bad, said Tenny. Evelyn froze, as if she couldn't believe her ears. Lozzie's eyes went wide and she clamped a hand over her mouth, trying to smother a laugh. Preem turned her head to stare at Tenny. Whatever those words meant, it went completely over my head. Excuse me? Evelyn asked. Or sad because mad? Tenny tried again, tilting her head to the side and doing a wobbly gesture with one tentacle, like somebody waving a hand. Bad things make me mad too. Mad and sad. Tenny's flutter voice grew louder, agitated, desperate to help. Auntie Evie sad. Makes me mad. Bad. Bad sad. Tenny blinked several times, her eyes finally wandering away from Evie and off to one side. Bad mad sad, she muttered to herself. Glad? Lozzie snorted and winced. Tens has just discovered rhyming. Tenny puffed her cheeks out. Already knew. Evelyn sighed and shook her head. I thought she was mocking me at first, it's fine. I'm sorry, I said, but I followed absolutely none of that. Is everything all right? Tenny. Tenny's attention snapped back to the room, as if she had been using all of her mental processing power to compose a new poem. Even her tentacles had all frozen for a second. I hadn't realized until they'd resumed moving again. She seemed to remember what she'd been trying to do in the first place. Auntie Evie. Tenny spread her tentacles out. Hug for sad. Evelyn cleared her throat, frowning and flushing a little. Well. It's not that I don't. Air hug, Tenny, I said. Remember that Auntie Evie has delicate bones? Air hug. Tenny nodded. No touch. I know. I know that, silly Heath. Evelyn looked intensely awkward and quite embarrassed as she and Tenny shared an air hug, with a wide cage of Tenny's silken black tentacles thrown around her, though without actually touching her directly. Tenny didn't seem embarrassed in the slightest, tilting her head and pretending to lay it on Evie's shoulder at a distance of about 2 feet away. Evie blushed and looked down at the floor tiles. As Tenny withdrew, Evie's free hand brushed against the final tentacle to leave, which then paused and waited. Tenny didn't look, already turning away to say something to Lozzie and I, but perhaps that was intentional. Perhaps Tenny understood that Auntie Evie needed the excuse of not being seen. Evie patted the tentacle and muttered something under her breath, something I almost didn't catch. You deserve better. By the time Rain got back with the curry, Evelyn wasn't so angry anymore, even if she was still exhausted. The second day of waiting for Felicity was less irritating than the first, because I turned out to be correct. But it was also infinitely more worrying also because I turned out to be correct. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I did after disentangling myself from Rain's arms and clambering over Zhang and planting a kiss on Seven's forehead was to creep out into the upstairs hallway and check the weather through the window, to make my prediction. The heavy storm clouds that had spent the previous day bullying Sherrowford had now receded from the city, but not actually left. They waited on the northern horizon, like a dark wall of roiling smoke and oil, waiting to descend and drown the land below. Above the city the light was clearer, the sun poking through in weak shafts of diluted gold, but the threat of a deluge still lay close. She's not coming today, I whispered to myself in the quiet of the morning, staring out of the window across the smothered dawn. But she's still planning on a visit. She's not bluffing. Edging, Preem said from halfway down the corridor. I jumped out of my skin, lashing myself to the walls and ceiling with my tentacles, my human feet tapping on the floor several times before I crammed my heart back down my throat. Preem! I hissed. How do you always do that? A pair of milk-white eyes met me from the shadows, reflecting the dull gray beyond the window. Stealth. I stared for a second, then laughed and smiled and shook my head. Yes, I suppose, that's technically accurate. Be careful not to do that when you're standing too close to me though, I don't want to accidentally slap you with a tentacle. Preem's head went up and down in a very precise and graceful nod. I will avoid such an outcome. Of course, I sighed. Of course. Then I looked out of the window again. So, you agree with me? She's not coming today. What did you say, edging? What do you mean? Preem stared at me, declining to answer. I blinked at her in the gloomy hallway. Preem could be so esoteric at times. You agree that she's somehow I sighed, this sounds so silly, Evie was right, it's absurd, I can't believe I'm saying this, but do you agree that she's controlling the weather, somehow? This is Aim's doing. Preem clicked softly down the floorboards to join me at the window. She emerged from the shadows, a great mass of maid uniform and the soft, cuddly Preem beneath, solid and real, hands clasped before her, prim and proper. As she stared at the distant horizon, the gravid storm roiled in her eyes. If the mountain won't come to Muhammad, she said. Then Muhammad must go to the mountain, I finished the saying, sighed, and shook my head. Preem, what does that mean, in this context? Preem turned her head from the window to stare at me. All white eyes in a pale face, her complexion like milk with a hint of rose, hair pinned up behind her head in a loose, messy bun, all blonde loops and loose locks. She stared, waiting for me. I sighed again and smiled with long-suffering indulgence. It means, I chewed on my tongue, thinking. Aim is still intending to visit, as promised, she's just irritating us in the meantime. We don't need to make alternative plans. We just need to shore up this one. Mountain climbing is difficult, said Preem. I nodded. Evie can't climb a mountain. At least not by herself. She can be carried. Then we'll carry her, I said. Preem, of all the things to worry about. I love her too, you know that. I glanced at Evie's bedroom door on the other side of the hallway, currently closed, no light showing from the crack at the bottom. The last thing I'm going to do is let Aim anywhere near her alone. She has to reach the mountain first. I frowned at Preem. Now you're mixing your metaphors. Now you're mixing your motivations. I blinked several times. Preem. Preem the demon doll, Preem Say, Evelyn's daughter, stared at me in the private gloom of the upstairs hallway, lit only by the storm-tossed horizon beyond the city. She declined to explain. I sighed, intentionally, blowing out a long breath and pulling my tentacles in close, halting their habitual random drift. I even pulled my back straight, odd, but I wasn't the slightest bit nervous in front of Preem, saying this. Preem, whatever confusion or difficulties I might be suffering regarding the exact nature of my personal relationship with Evie, you and I both know that I would lay siege to hell itself to stop her from getting hurt. We saved her together once before. Let's make sure it never gets to that point again. I blew out a second breath and discovered I was shaking slightly. My motivations might be mixed, but they're also very clear. Like mixing water and vodka. I guess. Wow, I'm sorry, that was bad. Preem smiled. It was the third such smile I had ever seen on Preem's face, a mechanical pulling at her soft, plush cheeks and the bow of her lips. Lack of practice had not improved her form. The smile was deeply unnatural, a forced pantomime of emotion, her face simply wasn't made for it. Are you smiling at my joke, or? I cleared my throat and trailed off. Preem stopped smiling. She stared at me instead, without saying anything. How very Preem. Preem, you don't have to pretend a smile, I said. You don't have to do that if it doesn't feel right. Yes. I bit my lip, unsure if she was just humoring me. And what about you? Are you okay with all this? I know this Aim thing is a lot to deal with. Preem stared. Where is this coming from? I asked. Are you just worried about Evie? Stare. Silent. I sighed. Are you worried Aim is going to get out of control? Are you worried she'll be beyond my powers to contain? Beyond your powers? No, said Preem, sudden and sharp. Okay, no offense meant. I'm sure you can make her cower with nothing but a sharp word. Preem, this is obviously bothering you. I think. I'm still not that great at reading your emotions. I will not be present to carry her for the final stretch. I blinked, then realized. Oh. Oh. Oh, echoed Preem. Oh, Preem, I'm so sorry. When I was making that deal with AIM, I didn't even think. I didn't think. You're not going to be in the room. It's going to be me and Evie. I should have included you. I should have. I'm so sorry. I reached out a hand toward Preem, subconsciously pleading for forgiveness. She was right, I had made the deal with AIM to protect Evie, but I hadn't included Preem. Who was better at protecting Evelyn Say than her own beloved daughter? To my surprise, Preem took my hand in hers. My eyes went wide. Is that? I said. Is that, apology accepted? Apology is not necessary. I'll look after Evie, I promise. It'll only be 20 minutes. Preem let go of my hand again. She turned back to the window, a punctuation mark on the entire conversation. I turned to stare outdoors too, at the looming storm clouds. But it was difficult to adjust. This was the most I'd heard in Preem's own words in a while. We should talk more often, I said after a moment. You and I don't get many chances to chat. Yes, said Preem. I suppose the storm clouds will stay at least until tomorrow. Yes. Do you really think AIM is controlling the weather? Yes. Do you think it's just to irritate us? Preem turned her head to stare at me. I sighed and shrugged. Ask a stupid question, I muttered. I didn't like being correct when it came to weird things that shouldn't be happening. The rest of that second day was an exercise in imposing my will by subterfuge, which I was exceptionally bad at. Luckily for me, Evie mostly went along with it. I had help, too. We knew AIM was going to delay Felicity again. Preem knew it, Rain trusted my judgment, Zheng picked it up without needing to be told, Sevens heard it through a door, Lazi probably learned it in a dream, and Tenny didn't really care. But Evie was determined to get very angry and shout at the phone again, so I spent the entire day luring her away with small horses. Ponies, of course. Rather than allow her to spend the day in the kitchen again, sinking deeper and deeper into a fugue state of anxiety and worry, I put into action every trick I'd learned from Rain, called on every bit of theatrical interruption owed to me by 7 shades of surreptitiously sly, and had Preem stare at Evie from about 3 inches away, all for the aim of getting her upstairs and in front of those cartoons again. She might turn up any bloody minute, Heather. We can't sit here, indulging ourselves all day. We have to be ready. One more episode. This is the end of the season. Heather, that was the end. Then next season. Evie huffed and crossed her arms. I would have to download it. We have good internet though, don't we? Yes, but you should let it sit. Digest what you just watched. Really? What about that show you mentioned 2 days ago, the one with the eye? Racked my brain. The Sad Magical Girls. Evelyn put her face in her hand. We are not watching more anime, not while I'm waiting for a demon to show up on my doorstep. Certainly not that one. Suffering, said Preem. Then how about, I poked at the track pad on Evie's laptop, which was sitting on a book on her bed again. How about this one? These two on the cover, are they a couple? They're cute. I like the style. One of them is a vampire, Evelyn grunted. It's silly. I swear I heard a gurgle from under the bed, but I chose to ignore it. Even better. I said. But they're a couple. Evelyn stared at the ceiling, looking like she couldn't decide if she wanted to shout at me or go to sleep. Yes. Well, canonically no. But yes. It's complicated. One of them finds the vampire in the woods and goes back to her house and theirs. Evelyn trailed off when she realized what I'd baited her into. She shot me a hard-eyed, blushing look. I just stared back, smiling and waiting. Innocent face. I told myself, keep an innocent face, you're just super interested in Evie's very sapphic cartoons, not distracting her from the frustration of waiting another day. Heather, we need to be ready. We are ready, I said. I'm ready for anything, including hearing about this vampire couple. Only one of them is a vampire, she sighed and then surrendered to my pestering. In a very real way, Evelyn was correct. Aim's attempt to wind her up and ratchet her anxiety to new heights really was getting in the way of important things. Or at least things I needed to get done. I still had no replacement for my broken mobile phone and we couldn't risk going out to buy one, in case Felicity did in fact begin her journey to Sherrowford that day. And there was no way I could mount the short but vital expedition to the Shamble Swamp, to check on the dimensional shamblers, as I had promised. Not until this task was safely over. But I took plenty of solace in spending the day with Evie regardless. We watched 2 different anime shows on that slow, strange, dreary day, the one about the vampire girl and her mortal totally not girlfriend, and another one about a group of lady assassins who all seemed to be in love with each other in a dizzying web of romantic nonsense. It was very distracting, which was exactly what Evie needed, especially when Rain started fielding the inevitable calls from Felicity about how she was still stuck. That evening, when Felicity's attempt to get herself moving had once again ended in abject failure, I made sure that Evelyn spent a nice long time soaking in the bath. Sanctuary for the mind, solace for the body. It took quite some convincing plus Preem's insistent stare, but eventually we got her in there. Rain found me standing half in half out of the doorway to Evelyn's bedroom, staring down the corridor and listening to the distant, muffled splash of water behind the closed door of the bathroom. How's she holding up? Rain asked. Sorry. Rain came up beside me, put one hand on the back of my neck, and started rubbing my muscles. I let out a low moan, almost a purr, and let my eyes flutter shut. Rain laughed softly. You seem kinda shell-shocked, Heather. Take some time for yourself too, okay? I've been relaxing with Evie all day, I'm fine. I opened my eyes again and looked up at Rain, at her warm brown eyes brimming with confidence, her hair raked back like she'd just run a hand through it. You're the one who's been dealing with all the phone calls. Thank you, Rain. I mean it. I wouldn't be able to do that and look after Evie at the same time. Rain smirked and shrugged. Snothing. Phone's easy for me. Still, thank you. I think today was the last of it. I think they'll set off for real tomorrow. Rain raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? You got a theory? I nodded toward the dark panes of the window. Evening darkness had fallen far too early for a summer's night. On the horizon, lit from below by the glow of light pollution, the storm wall loomed over Sherrowford like the face of a nightmare god. That storm's going to break in the morning. She'll arrive at the same time. Rain raised both eyebrows at me in surprise. Not disbelief or skepticism, not even a little bit. For serious? She asked. I suddenly felt very silly. I think. It's only a theory. Evie says it's just weather, but it feels wrong to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Hey, Heather, there's no shame in being wrong about something, Rain murmured, soft and intimate, for my ears only. She leaned over and kissed me on the forehead. It's better to have a theory and get proved wrong, rather than not bother thinking at all, right? Right, I sighed. I just mean magic. Even after all this time, it feels so silly. Magical weather because of a demon, really? Rain laughed and ruffled my hair. You're real tired. I can tell. You've done real good today, looking after Evie. Better than I ever could. Well done, Heather. I shrugged and pulled an awkward smile, looking down the corridor again, toward the bathroom. I really love her, do you know that? Why did you say that? Part of my mind screamed, but the rest of me was totally at ease, even as I looked up at Rain, seeking approval or understanding. Rain ruffled my hair again. Course you do. So do I. No, I mean I love her. Rain grinned. Wanna go join her in the bathroom? TCH. I tooted. Rain. No. I'm serious. So am I. Go join her in the bathtub, that'll keep her spirits up. I gave Rain a withering look, but she just snorted. What was I trying to do here, confess something important, or express something she already knew? My heart rate was steady, my palms were dry, I was utterly at ease. Rain already knew all this, or thought she knew. Preem's already in the room with her, in case she has trouble getting out of the tub, I said as a compromise, falling back on the practical dimension. As always. Rain laughed, pulled me into a rough and sudden hug, and kissed the top of my head. Between you and Preem, Evie's gonna be just fine. I melted into Rain's arms, leaning my head against her shoulder and closing my eyes. Only then did I realize just how tense I was. The storm boiled away on the horizon of my mind's eye, to reveal a dripping grin beneath the clouds. Distant thunder woke me the next morning, slow waves of mercury and molten silver crashing against a shore of broken glass, rolling across the sky. Raindrops tapped and danced on the roof tiles, hesitant for now, testing us. The sun was dead and buried. Less than 20 minutes later, I was proven correct. Into the gloom of our bedroom sprang the sickly light of Rain's phone screen, flashing with an incoming call. Felicity, and it wasn't even 7 o'clock in the morning yet. Jing growled from the other side of me, a shifting bulk moving to protect me from an unseen threat. Rain sat up in bed, sneezed into her elbow, and scooped up the phone. She answered the call by saying, "You better be on your bloody way this time, Fliss." She was. The reclusive mage and her difficult demon were finally on their way to Sherrowford, just as the storm was breaking. The rain steadily worsened over the next 3 hours as the storm moved over the city. Then the clouds seemed to stop overhead, hanging low and thick and dark, turning Sherrowford damp and chilly with the unbroken drizzle. Felicity called us twice more, once from the road and once from a service station on the M6, to let us know that all was well and she was making good time. We prepared for her arrival, but there was little left to do, except keep a close eye on Evelyn's mood. She sat in the kitchen, reading, waiting, seemingly calm and ready. I had given her all I could. By the time Felicity reached the outskirts of Sherrowford, the storm's drizzle had turned into a torrential downpour. Raindrops slammed against the roof and pounded through the leaves on the old tree out in the garden. Muddy wallows were forming around the back patio where short-lived streams cut through the unkempt grass. The garden path was under half an inch of water and the road itself was swirling with little eddies and puddles as the drains backed up. No wind, so the rain fell straight down from the unmoving clouds. We even checked the news and found the newsreaders in serious mode, frowning and nodding, the weather lady gesticulating over a map of the northwest of England, with Sherrowford picked out beneath a cross-hatching of alarming red. This storm was a big deal, flooding low-lying parts of the city center and dumping months' worth of rain into the river. Downstream would be even worse. Amid this veil of storm, a dark chariot drew to a stop outside the house. "She's here," Rain announced, peering out of the window in the old disused sitting room. "Places, ladies, places please." Nobody had to be told twice. Felicity had been given very specific instructions about what to do when she arrived. Much to my relief, she followed them to the letter. She was probably terrified that I might set Jing on her. Rain received 2 text messages from Felicity, confirming that she was here and that she was ready. Rain and I got into our shoes, following our part of the plan, though we hadn't planned on the need to wear coats and grab umbrellas, but we did so anyway. No sense in getting soaked. Evie waited in the kitchen, heavily guarded. There was no chance of Aim ambushing her before we were ready. She had Preem, Zheng, Sevens, Lazi, and Tenny all in there with her. If Aim wanted to appear to her without warning, she was going to get chokeslammed by 2 demons and a playwright, as Rain so delicately put it. That failed to get a laugh out of Evie. "Get on with it," she said. "Go make sure she's alive, or whatever. Or not." "Stay dry," said Preem. That was easier said than done. Rain and I stepped out of the front door and into the pounding rain, huddling close together. Water streamed off the pair of umbrellas we'd brought for protection, but even they couldn't keep the storm entirely at bay. I kept my tentacles wound in close, wrapped around my limbs and anchored to Rain's waist too, as if we were venturing into an Arctic night. We started off down the path, Wellington boots splashing in the rushing stream of water. "That's the car, right?" Rain asked, speaking over the static of the raindrops. "The same one from the last time she visited, yes." Felicity's car was partially obscured by the sheer density of the rain pounding against the bodywork and tinted windows, but there was no mistaking it for any other vehicle. A battered old Range Rover, dark green, eaten away at the edges by slow rust. Even washed clean by the rain, the thing looked about ready to lie down and die of exhaustion. I knew very little about cars, but Rain had informed me that when new, such a car would have cost a very large amount of money. The engine was silent, no lights showed inside the cabin, and the windscreen wipers lay still. But I could see a vague outline through the windscreen as we approached, a figure sitting in the driver's seat, watching us draw close. Felicity, for it must have been her, raised a hand in limp greeting. Rain and I stopped on the pavement next to the passenger side door, our Wellington boots squeaking against the wet ground. Rain tilted her umbrella so Felicity could lower the window without getting a torrent of water inside her car. I huddled close to Rain, bracing for anything, one tentacle raised to what? To punch through the glass and grab Felicity by the face? To intercept Aim if she darted out like a missile? Through the tinted glass, the figure inside leaned over and found the handle to manually crank the window down. With aching slowness, the dark glass lowered, revealing the unmistakable face of Felicity Amber Hackett. Felicity was a very strange-looking woman indeed, a certain kind of face one never forgets. Whatever she had been responsible for, whatever she had once inflicted upon Evie, however much she was a mage, it was difficult to look at the facts of her flesh and not feel at least some sympathy. The entire left side of Felicity's face was a burned scar. Old, reddish, rough scarring stretched from her scalp, blurred her brow and cheek and jaw, and vanished down inside her neckline. She had no left ear. Her left eye was blind, milky white, sight burned away. The left corner of her lips was missing, wiped away by flame, the source of her permanent mumble. The healthy side, her right, was unguarded, skittish, and soft. She didn't look like a mage at all. In fact, she reminded me in an uncomfortable way of some of the older girls I'd briefly known at Signet Children's Hospital. Gentle, afraid, haunted, forced into constant hypervigilance. Felicity wasn't intimidating at all. She was a very pitiful thing, brittle and willowy, moving as if always suppressing internal pain or hiding an injury. Her reddish-brown hair fell to the middle of her back. She was wearing a dark cardigan and a battered blue coat, big boots on her feet and black leather gloves on both hands. "Flissy," said Rain, grinning without guile. "Here at last, hey. Didn't get to see you in the flesh last time you came down." Felicity froze, then straightened up very, very slowly indeed, back into the driver's seat, as if Rain was a rattlesnake she had disturbed by turning over a rock. Her good eye stayed locked on Rain with all the focus of a gunfighter preparing to draw. She took great care to keep both hands in view as she moved, then carefully placed them back on the steering wheel, at 2 and 10. Which was smart, in front of Rain, because Felicity had a gun lying in her lap. I sighed sharply when I realized, shaking my head. A towel-wrapped bundle lay across Felicity's thighs, about the right size and shape for the sawn-off shotgun she'd brought with her on her previous visit. One end was pointed off at an angle, not quite at us. The other end was open, the towel partially unwrapped, probably so she could access the grip and trigger. What is it with mages and paranoia? I snapped. You could have at least kept the thing in a bag. What is it even for? Were you planning a drive-by? Felicity blinked at me, suddenly self-conscious and mortified. I'm sorry, she said in her distinct half-mumble from her restricted mouth. Precautions. You have to understand, there's always precautions to take, when I'm away from home. Hey, it's all cool, Rain said, still smiling. She leaned forward, one elbow on the lip of the car window. Nothing to worry about, no danger to us. Why yes, Felicity agreed. It's not for you, not aimed at you. I never know who I might see on the road. Have to be careful. Besides, said Rain. Even with your gun in your lap and mine in my coat, I'd still draw faster than you. Felicity went white with fear. Rain had the good grace to look a little sheepish, clearing her throat and looking away, out into the pouring rain, but she still grinned like this was all a big joke. Well, you know. She started it. It's a gun, Rain. Take this seriously. I am taking it seriously. She laughed. That's why I'm armed. TCH, I tooted inside, then turned my anger on Felicity too. She flinched before I even opened my mouth, but she kept her hands glued to the steering wheel. And you, this is practically a replay of last time you visited. Pointing a concealed weapon at us again. Mages, I swear to good sense, all of you are impossible. I huffed and peered into the back of the car, past the passenger seat, but there was nothing back there except a couple of large bags, some towels, and a bundle of wires. Where's AIM, anyway? It's not even loaded for people, Felicity mumbled. I'm sorry. I blinked back at her, not sure if I'd heard that right. Felicity was staring at me with a kind of hollow horror in her one good eye, exhausted and twitchy. Rain laughed. Silver shot or iron pellets still work just the same on human beings, Fliss. Good thing it's not loaded with those, then, Felicity said to Rain. I could point this at you and pull the trigger and it wouldn't hurt you. It's not for you. I have things of my own going on, okay? Felicity's voice threatened to break. She panted twice, to get her composure back, as little as it was. I need to carry protection. It's got nothing to do with you. Rain studied her for a moment, then nodded, no longer laughing or grinning. Okay, Fliss. We're cool. Does this mean you gotta carry that gun into our house? Felicity blinked twice. I wasn't expecting to be allowed inside. I sighed, hunching a little against the rain, despite my umbrella. Yes, I think it's best if you don't come in. Evelyn has agreed not to try to kill you, I want to make that clear. But it would make her very unhappy. Felicity looked down at her car's dashboard, her eyes miles away. She nodded to herself. Yeah. I don't get to see her. I don't. Can you maybe tell her from me? After she's spoken to AIM, I said. It took all my ruthlessness, all my hard-hearted love for Evie, to tell this broken woman no. Felicity drew in a shuddering breath, then nodded. She didn't look at us. Hey, Fliss, Rain said. Serious question, yeah. Felicity looked up at last. That gun, you out here on your own, once AIM comes inside with us and all. Are you safe? Felicity stared for a moment, then swallowed, then straightened up. She seemed to find some strength in the answer to that question. Probably. If I was being followed, I would know by now. If something arrives, well, that's what the gun's for. I'll be all right. Rain nodded. A professional reassuring a rookie. I peered into the back seat again. Where's AIM? Yeah, Rain said, you hiding her in the boot? Felicity sighed. She's always here, always with me. If you go inside and go into a room alone, she'll be ready. Heather and Evie alone, I mean. She normally never shows herself to more than one person at a time, but she'll cooperate for this. I guess. Real spooky. Rain shot Felicity a wink. And make sure, Felicity added, make sure nobody else is alone during this. She might, well, I don't know what she might do. I don't control her. I can't. She might, Felicity trailed off and shrugged. We've made sure everybody is together, I said. All in one place. Rain opened her mouth then stopped, eyebrows shooting up. She turned to me. I frowned at her, then my eyes went wide and I put my free hand over my mouth. Don't say, Felicity started. Kim's not at work today, Rain said, then snapped back to Felicity. Oh. Shit. Did I just jinx us? Kimberly. I hissed. You're right. She was sleeping in late, she always sleeps in late on her days off. Felicity went gray, panting with panic. You said it. You said it. Not me. She's going to have heard that. Rain rapped her knuckles on the car door to get Felicity's attention. Hey. What do we do? Interrupt her. Quickly. Kimberly is tougher than she looks, I said. We have time to get back indoors and get her with the others before. A scream of mad panic suddenly cut through the storm, muffled by the pounding rain in the walls of the house and the complexity of the second-floor bedrooms. I had not heard that scream in months and months, the sort of scream that went on and on as somebody scrambled out of bed and hurled objects and fell over and banged into things. Kimberly, screaming her head off. A scream in the storm. Lost inside the enclosing shadows of the upper floor with its labyrinth of rooms, muffled behind the thick plaster and stout brick of the exterior walls. Soaked up by the cloud ceiling like an inverted gray ocean pressing down on the city, almost drowned out by the aural static of the rain pounding against roof tiles and pavement and asphalt and mud, Kimberly was screaming in terrified panic, and there could be only one possible cause. Kimberly wasn't much for screaming. A scream is a call for help. After all, Kimberly had spent too much of her life learning that nobody was coming to help. A scream, even a metaphorical one, would only attract more attention, and attention could only ever come from predators, exploiters, and abusers. It would take a lot longer than a few months of safety and security for Kimberly to unlearn any of that, no matter how good our intentions or how well we treated her. Sometimes I wished she could seek therapy, but what would she say? She would have to craft an elaborate lie, or else speak in such general terms that any competent psychologist would smell a rat. I'd seen how she reacted in her very worst moments, pushed right to the edge of her thin and ragged sanity. One of those times had come after days of silent torment, hiding alone in her old apartment, wondering if the I-Sent Lozzie thing would return, intimidated by Amy Stack, waiting for death, or worse than death. On that occasion she had been driven to violence in the end. She'd stabbed Twill in the hand after we broke into her flat, but as soon as the violence was done she had crumpled in submission and begged for mercy. Weeks later Zheng had almost killed her right there in our front room, or at least came within a muscle twitch of ripping out her tongue. That time Kimberly had offered almost no resistance, crying softly in the aftermath. She tended to hide and retreat, preferred to make herself small and unseen, to minimize her exposed contact surfaces, like a tiny rodent living in a land of blood-mauled carnivores. She'd been living with us for months, but she still stuck mostly to herself. She went to work, exchanged hellos and good mornings whenever somebody bumped into her in the kitchen, and chipped in a little for the usual grocery shopping and electricity bills, but she lived in her bedroom, playing video games, smoking cannabis, and talking incessantly with a very large number of online friends. According to Rain, she was also spending a lot of time with her Wiccan coven. Good for her, I thought. I ventured into her bedroom now and again, if only to make sure she was getting on okay. She steadfastly pretended that Jing didn't exist, and seemed embarrassed by Lozzie's very presence. She was on good terms with Preem somehow, though I'd never seen them talking. We all knew that Tenny sometimes crept into her bedroom to peer at strange and exciting video games. I did hope they would maybe become friends, in time. For Kimberly, screaming like that was a big deal. Fear and shock had overpowered her desire not to be seen or known. Evelyn and I rarely discussed this out loud, but we both knew why we kept Kimberly close, why we gave her a comfortable and safe place to live, rent-free. It was our way of trying to help one of the victims of the Sherrowford cult to take some of the vast responsibility demanded by our power. Kimberly wanted nothing to do with magic anymore, so we sheltered her from it, paradoxically enough, by keeping her close to the center of our own magically derived safety. Kimberly Kemp was a survivor of a very specific kind of abuse and exploitation. She was reclusive and shy, sweet and funny. She probably had post-traumatic stress disorder. The last thing she needed was an unscheduled wake-up call by a horrible apparition in the dark of an unnatural storm. AIM was up there, whispering unknown nightmares in Kimberly's ear. Abyssal instinct, 8-pack imperative, and simple decency all agreed on one thing: that Scream would not go unanswered. Kimberly was one of us. Standing by the passenger side door of Felicity's Range Rover, Rain and I wasted all of half a second staring back toward the house through the pounding raindrops. Then Rain shot me a look. She didn't need to ask with words. Yes, I said. Go. Rain snapped her umbrella shut and sprinted for the front door, Wellington boots splashing through the churning water on the garden path, raindrops bouncing and spattering off her shoulders, soaking her jeans, and slicking her hair to her skull in an instant. Strictly speaking, that was totally unnecessary. The house currently contained several people far scarier than Rain, more than capable of dealing with AIM, who would be up those stairs just as quick. But my instincts demanded that I send my own best protector to save Kimberly. Instinct demanded I go too. Prudence kept me rooted. Felicity was still fumbling to raise the passenger side window, winding the hand crank at speed. She had gone white in the face, shakily jamming her towel-wrapped shotgun into the bag on the back seat. The sensible part of my mind was calmly explaining to me that Felicity was our best bet at peeling AIM away from her new toy. Whatever I'd said a few moments ago about not allowing her inside the house, that no longer mattered. I should wait the few seconds for her to scramble out of the car, and then take her inside. She had claimed she couldn't control AIM, but she must be able to do something to help. Rain was at the front door, yanking it open, kicking off her Wellington boots. Then Kimberly stopped screaming. The silence filled with the pounding of the storm. Abyssal instinct and Savannah 8-pack imperative rocketed through me like an electric shock. I barely knew what I was doing when I picked up my feet up and shot after Rain, my own Wellington boots splashing halfway down the path before I veered off into front lawn and around the side of the house, squelching in the sodden grass, water swirling over the toes of the boots. I must have lost my umbrella, because I was soaked instantly, hair plastered to my skull as I looked up at the second floor of the house, searching for Kimberly's bedroom window. Kim! I shouted up into the rain. My voice was a whisper in the storm. Open your window. The rain slammed down in sheets of water, turning the air to static gray, pouring out of the overflowing gutters along the roof. I couldn't see the house properly, let alone tell one window from the other. One window was lit and lacked curtains, that must have been the one in the upstairs hallway. The dark and curtained one next to it, that must have been my bedroom. But in the other direction there were 4 windows. Surely Kimberly's was the one right on the end, but that made no sense. The bathroom should have been on the end. Or was it Lozzie's bedroom? For a moment the second floor of number 12, Barneslow Drive, made no sense. It was like looking at a house I'd never seen before. My tentacles gathered behind me, coiling up and bracing against the water-saturated ground, like 6 great muscular springs. Deep in my belly, my trilobe bioreactor squeezed out a control rod, flushing my skin with heat to counteract the chill of the rain. My legs itched to kick and bounce. My stomach lurched with anticipation. This was one of the most ill-advised impulses I had ever followed, but I couldn't stop. Rain would be up there in seconds, she was already inside. Zheng might already be up there, tearing Aim to pieces. Why was I preparing to fling myself into the air? Because abyssal instinct had finally found an ideology around which it fitted like a glove. Angel Squid Heather had no choice but to protect. Only confusion held me back. I had no idea which window to target. I wasn't so far gone as to hurl myself at the house and burrow through the brickwork. Then, just at the moment I might have come to my senses and thought better of trying to imitate a flying squirrel, the lights flicked on behind the last window in the row. The curtains twitched, then swept aside. A terrified pale face peered down at me, framed by messy auburn hair. "Kim!" I shouted again, bouncing on the spot like my legs were going to explode. "Open the window." Kim fumbled with the latch. The window swung outward, banging on its hinges. A few stray raindrops fell on the back of Kimberly's shivering arm before she pulled herself back inside. And I let go with all those muscular springs. At the time, I felt like a squid shooting through the oceanic deep on a plume of water-powered jet propulsion, sleek and athletic. A momentary shadow of abyssal grace touched me inside, like a point of glowing warmth inside my chest, a feeling of rightness in my own skin. Perhaps it was the pounding rain, the water running down my face and neck. In reality I probably resembled one of those children's toys that you can stick to a hard surface with a sucker cup, then wait a few seconds for it to bounce upward under its own vacuum pressure. My stomach lurched as I left the ground behind. For one dizzying heartbeat I felt like I was the one who should have been screaming, as I slammed right into the aperture of Kimberly's open window. But my tentacles did the thinking for me, whipping around to catch the frame like I was a spider clinging to my own self-made web. A few paces inside the room, Kimberly gaped at me, wide-eyed with shock. I didn't blame her. It wasn't every day a squid girl climbed in your window. I certainly hoped none of the neighbors had seen, or we were about to appear in some very outlandish news of the weird style articles on the internet. I tumbled into the room and landed in a wet heap on the floorboards, like an octopus dumped on the deck of a fishing boat, tentacles and limbs lashing and flapping, coat drenched on the inside, hair stuck to my skull. I had the presence of mind to kick my Wellington boots off where I'd landed, so I didn't create an even bigger muddy mess on the lovely soft rugs Kimberly had further in. As soon as I was clear I leapt to my feet, a warning hiss in my throat, head whipping left and right. Kimberly stood shaking in the center of her bedroom, arms clasped across her chest and belly, staring at me with more than a touch of awe. Small and mousy and twitchy as ever, she was panting, tear tracks down her face, her auburn hair in a post-sleep mess. She was still in her pajama bottoms and an old t-shirt, with a picture of a pretty boy elf on the front. There was a big crease down the side of her face from where she'd been sleeping. Her bed sheets were all askew, pastel blankets yanked to one side as if she'd just lurched out of bed and gotten tangled halfway. Her pillow was on the other side of the room, presumably hurled there moments earlier. Her computer, a proper desktop tower, was happily humming away to itself beneath her desk. I politely pretended not to notice the 2 boxes of tissues next to the monitor, along with the open comic book of dubious content on the desk. Her bookshelf had suffered a casualty from the commotion. A couple of books had fallen off, presumably when she had blundered into it, and knocked one of her little statues over. A porcelain unicorn statue, wild and noble and suspiciously muscular, lay on the floor, neatly shattered into 2 pieces. The room smelled faintly of cannabis, of course. I spotted several little baggies full of green stuff on her bedside table, next to rolling papers and other detritus. Aim was nowhere to be seen, but then again, I didn't know what to look for. At least the lights were on, blazing and bright. The door was closed, but I could hear half a dozen footsteps hurling themselves up the stairs and then along the hallway. Somebody called out Kimberly's name. Kimberly found her voice, robotic and stunned. Tentacles working well, then. I blinked at her. "Kim, are you all right?" She swallowed, blinking several times, like a waking sleepwalker. Her eyes flickered around the room, dazed and confused. She was caught between sleep and adrenaline, more animal than human right then, confused about where she was, what she was, how to respond. Then she cringed and hunched, the terror coming back in a sudden panting hyperventilation. There was a thing. Rain chose that exact moment to burst in through Kimberly's bedroom door. Zheng was right on top of her like her shadow, filling her blind spot. The pair of them looked ready to wrestle a monster, Zheng moving with that flowing predatory muscularity that made my bowels quiver with the echo of old fear, Rain with a naked combat knife in one hand. Kimberly whirled and squeaked, backing up and bumping into her desk again. But Rain and Zheng both stopped in surprise when they saw me already standing there, dripping wet by the open window. Heather. Rain broke into a grin, then started laughing. How did you get up here? Did you climb through the window? You're soaked. Sort of, I said, coming to my senses. I had to swallow down a hiss and wipe the dripping water out of my eyes. My hair was soaked, my clothes were stuck to my skin. My reactor was ramping up, my skin feeling like it should be glowing with heat. Any further and I might start steaming. Neither wall nor ditch can bar the shaman, Zheng purred, then whipped her attention around the room, dark eyes narrowed, teeth exposed. Where is the goblin? Gone already, I said. Kim's eyes flicked between faces and corners, badly shaken. I don't even know what that was, what was. Rain quickly crossed the room, putting away her knife so she could squeeze Kimberly's shoulder. She was a little wet too, but nowhere near as bad as me. Hey, Kim, ease down, you got nothing to worry about, nothing to be afraid of. We're all here now, nothing else is gonna happen. Me and Zheng, we're your bodyguards right now. How's that feel? Safe, right? See, you've even got Heather up here to look out for you. Take a deep breath with me, okay? Nice deep breath, in and out. That's it, that's good. And another. Kimberly stared up at Rain with eyes just as intimidated and terrified as before. But she obeyed, she did as she was told, sucking down a great shuddering breath and then letting it in unison with Rain. There, that's better, Rain purred for her, blasting her with a full dose of Rain confidence. Good girl. Kim, I said gently. What happened? If you can tell us. Kimberly looked caught between a rock and a hard place. I think Rain's good girl encouragement had done more harm than good. But she found her voice and stumbled over the words. It was I was in bed. I heard a scratching sound so I rolled over onto my back and there was a shadow on the headboard. It was drooling this black stuff. Kimberly's hands went to her chin and neck and chest, but she was clean of any mysterious black ichor. And then it had leaned down and whispered I can't. So she appeared and then vanished again? I asked. That is her style, said a familiar half-mumble. Felicity joined us in the room, which surprised me. Out of her car and up on her feet, Felicity was tall, more than 6 foot, willowy and brittle, moving with the caution of a long-term osteoporosis sufferer. A sports bag was slung over one shoulder, her shotgun presumably contained within. The hood and shoulders of her coat were wet from the rain. Her hands were free, black gloves plainly visible, so at least I could be certain she wasn't pointing any weapons at anybody. She seemed to have located her spine, both literally and metaphorically, straight-backed and clear-eyed. She was still pale and shaken, still poachy-eyed and fragile, but there was unmistakable confidence in her musculature and unhesitating stare. It was like she'd flicked a switch in her own head. She kept a careful distance between herself and Zheng, fingers flicking once in some covert gesture when the hulking demon host looked at her and growled, but apparently Kimberly was more important. This is her, she asked, staring at Kim, then answered her own question quickly, speed mumbling as if talking more to herself than anybody in the room. Kimberly, yes, I remember you from last time. You saw AIM, what did she say to you? It could be important. What did she say? Kimberly blinked at her, unable to process the sudden arrival. And nothing important. What? Who? Hey Flissy, Rain said. Back off a step or two, hey. Felicity grimaced and gritted her teeth. Confidence had not changed her erratic agitation. It could be important, all right. Behind her, 3 little faces peered around the door frame: Lozzie, Tenny, and Sevens, all lingering at the threshold. It was already getting quite cramped in the room with 5 of us in here already. Tenny looked especially distressed, trying openly to catch Kimberly's eye, waving with her black tentacles. Kim, she fluttered. Kim. Kim. To my surprise, Kimberly called softly past Rain. I am okay, Tenny. Lozzie petted Tenny on the head. She's okay, Tens. Everybody's here to help. But Tenny still seemed very worried, shifting from foot to foot, but seemingly unwilling to push past Jeng. Where's Evie? I said. Lozzie, where is Evie? Nobody should be alone right now, especially not. Evelyn herself answered from much further down the upstairs corridor, yelling at the top of her lungs. Don't do that, Preem. I called back. Don't leave Evie by herself. Preem replied in a voice like the chime of a bell. Evelyn is accompanied. Rain cleared her throat with forced politeness and shot Felicity a meaningful look, as if over a pair of imaginary glasses. Evie's got a point, you ain't supposed to be in here. Aim's already gone again, so we're cool now, okay? Crisis averted, everybody's alright, not gonna happen again. Time to head back out to your car. Felicity stared for a second, her one good eye frozen on Rain in a moment of indecision. She no longer appeared like the woman we'd seen out in her car, consumed by apology and self-hatred. For one strange moment I was certain she was about to challenge Rain. My own tentacles twitched as if to reach out and restrain her. Zheng's gaze slid round to the lurking mage, teeth peeling back on an implicit threat. Above our heads, raindrops drummed on the roof, turning the house into a great echoing cave. Behind me, the window still stood open, admitting the static haze of grey noise and the creeping cold of the ever-present storm. Then Felicity's newfound confidence ebbed away. She swallowed and nodded and looked down. Yes. Yes, you're right, I shouldn't be in here. Just Kimberly, are you okay? Is she okay? Not really, said Kim. She kept her arms pressed to her front. Her eyes seemed unable to stay still. She looked like a mouse amid a group of well-fed snakes, hoping that none of us were hungry. Rain squeezed her shoulder again and caught her eye. You'll be fine, you can spend the rest of the day with Lozzie and Tenny, that'll keep Aim away from you. You can all go play Mario Kart, cool. Kim let out a nervous, weird laugh, a forced hiccup of confusion. I didn't even know anything was happening today. I winced. I'm sorry, Kim. I should have kept you in the loop. It's my fault. Kimberly shot me a wide-eyed, confused look. She didn't even understand what was going on, but that wasn't her fault. And hey, Heather, Rain said with a smirk, you need to get dry. You're soaked all the way through. Ah. Yes. I sighed a little sigh, suddenly embarrassed, and flopped my dripping coat sleeves against my sides. I hardly felt cold at all, the heat from my reactor already burning off the worst of the water. Yes. Well. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Felicity suddenly tensed up and frowned at me. Wait, how did you get up here? Through the window, I sighed. Lozzie snorted. Jing grinned a grin that showed all her teeth, proud of her shaman. Sevens made a gurgly little noise. Felicity just stared at the window, then back at me. Even her blank, burned out eye looked concerned. I've changed quite a bit since you met me, I said with another little sigh, my face going hot with embarrassment. Suffice to say, I don't usually make a habit of jumping through second-floor windows. It was probably a bad idea. Lozzie leaned further into the room, hanging from the door frame, long blonde hair hanging down, pastel poncho flopping sideways. She was biting her lower lip, either feeling mischievous or doing a great deal of thinking. "Fliss, how are you surprised at Heath going boing but not by everything about 1010s?" Felicity frowned more. 1010s. "Tenny," said Tenny. "Is me." "Hi." When Felicity looked at Tenny, I realized that Lozzie was correct. Felicity wasn't the least bit surprised by the obviously inhuman sight of Tenny, with her swirling patches of white fur over coal-black skin, her obviously non-human wings hanging down either side of her body, her mass of tentacles waving above her shoulders, the pair of twitching, fluffy antennae on her head, or the simple fact of her huge black eyes. Felicity didn't return Tenny's greeting, but just glanced at Lozzie and shrugged, as if confused why any response was required from her at all. Sometimes it was easy to forget this woman was a mage. I cleared my throat. "Tenny is a child," I said. "Tenny, it's good to greet people." "Felicity, what do you say when a child greets you?" Felicity looked at me in a moment of unsettled confusion, as if she wasn't certain whether I was being serious, but was utterly sure about my tone of voice. I gave her a look. She glanced back at Tenny. "Hello," she said, stiff and uncomfortable, then looked away again. I kept my pained sigh to myself. I suppose Tenny would have to learn sooner or later that not all adults were capable of returning a pleasant greeting. "Tenny!" Evie called from far down the upstairs hallway. "Don't speak with her. She's dangerous. Lozzie, you keep Tenny away from her." Lozzie made a pouty face and took one of Tenny's tentacles in hand. Tenny let out a fluttering, trilling noise of confusion, glancing over her shoulder, presumably at Evie. Head tilting side to side, Tenny didn't quite follow. Rain cleared her throat. "Fliss, back to your car, please. We'll take care of Kim, she'll be fine." "Right," Felicity said. She nodded, eyes finding the floor easier than anybody's face. "Loz," Rain said, "would you please run down the corridor and make sure Preem takes Evie down the stairs first? We don't want these two bumping into each other like a pair of cats in the hallway." Clawing and biting and marrow, went Lozzie, making a little paw with one hand. She sketched a joking salute and then tugged on Tenny. "Let's go help Auntie Evie, Tens." "Auntie Evie." Tenny agreed. And that was when the lights went out. There was no dramatic pop of a bursting fuse or the electric crackle of a failing bulb, just the fall of sudden gloom as the lights in Kimberly's bedroom died. The faint happy hum of her desktop computer shut off as well. The lights must have failed out in the hallway too, because we were plunged into a deep, sucking, rain-washed gloom of gray shadows and thickened darkness. The storm outdoors had already swallowed the sun, the only illumination was the thin and sickly light creeping in through the windows. I flinched in surprise. Kimberly let out a pitiful whimper. Tenny made a surprised trill, like a tree-dwelling rodent discovering the floor had disappeared. Lozzie went brr, and Sevens gurgled. Down the corridor, I heard Evelyn huff in sheer disbelief and exasperation. Zhang seemed unaffected, of course. Rain, by contrast, went into action instantly, stepping away from Kimberly so she could peer around me and out of the open window. I think I was the only one who noticed how Felicity reacted. She went wide-eyed and tense, holding her breath, one hand on her sport bag. She was staring right at Kimberly. A bloody power cut. Evelyn yelled. "Now. Really? Very original, aim. I hunt better in the dark," Jing rumbled. "The goblin will have nowhere to hide." Rain craned her head to see out of the window. I realized she was looking at the house opposite. "Nah," she called back to Evelyn. "It's just us, lights are on up the street. Preem, you want to check the fuse box? Take Evie with you. Nobody moves around alone, okay?" "Safety trio," Preem said from out in the corridor. "Lozzie, Tenny." "Yeah." Lozzie chirped. Rain turned to me. Heather, you want to get out of those wet clothes. If we can't get the power back on quick, we'll lose heat fast. Get dry, take Sevens with you, I'll stick with Kimberly and Kimby Yarlow, scratched a voice from the fevered dreams of a medieval diabolist. A shadow was clinging to Kimberly's back. It had not been there a moment earlier. The thick grey gloom of the stormlight concealed all details beneath a veil of hanging darkness. The shadow was indistinct, peering over Kimberly's left shoulder from behind, like a small child or a koala bear or the top half of a bisected corpse lashed to her back. Talons or claws or sharp fingers dug into the shoulders and sides of her t-shirt, visible only by the indentations they made in cloth and flesh. The grey, dead light washed out any facial features, leaving behind only pits for eyes and the suggestion of a slash for a mouth. What an interesting name, AIM purred like a voicebox filled with rusty iron filings. Black drool fell in sticky ropes onto Kim's shoulder. Kimberly was frozen in terror, eyes wide, tears falling silently down her face. Out in the corridor, Tenny let out a noise of trilling alarm. Lozzie said something indistinct, some muttered reassurance. Closer at hand, Rain turned, ready to tackle something she could barely see. Zheng pulled an arm back, fingers wide, limb blurring with sudden motion as the rest of her body rocked forward, the opening split second of a move to rip the demon off Kimberly's back. No! Felicity yelled, one hand up. Don't touch her. It's dangerous. To my surprise, Zheng actually paused, dark eyes swiveling to look at Felicity. To me, wizard. To anybody, Felicity said in an urgent mumble, eyes locked on AIM. Do not touch her. Oh, Kimberly whimpered, so soft and small. Please, please, somebody. I could not respond to that. My tentacles were whirling upward into a star of threat posture, growing sharp at their tips. I felt a hiss crawling up my throat. This violation would not go unanswered. Hey! Rain said, taking a step to one side, as if trying to flank AIM. You get off Kim right now, you little shit. AIM, I said, struggling to keep my voice sounding at least a little human. I will hurt you. I warned you. I will. But AIM didn't seem to care about what anybody said. She wasn't even interested in my tentacles, let alone surprised. She giggled, an awful noise like gravel being pulverized. Kimberly closed her eyes and started to hyperventilate. Felicity dropped her sports bag, spread her arms, and took a step toward the demon. You get off that girl's back, AIM, she said. HNNNNH, went AIM. A row of claws seemed to ascend up Kimberly's sides. The shadow rose higher, pushing itself upward so it was level with the top of Kimberly's head. Standing up for somebody, now. Where's that spine when you're all alone, Flissy Poos? Get off that girl right now, AIM, Felicity said. I won't repeat myself a third time. What do you care? AIM spat. She's so delicious, I can taste her in the air, raw. A little heat and pressure and she'll go from quiet self-pity to tearing her hair out and... Felicity did the absolute last thing I expected, especially for a woman who moved around like she was recovering from a dozen broken bones. She lunged at AIM. Apparently AIM hadn't expected that either. The shadowy wisp of irritating demon let out a yelp, a sound like a pair of rusty knives getting snapped beneath the wheels of a tractor. She detached herself from Kimberly's back and seemed to melt into the shadows, like a swimmer pushing off from an underwater ledge. But Felicity was faster. One gloved hand shot past Kimberly's shoulder and grabbed a fistful of darkness, gloved fingers sinking into nothingness made solid. AIM squealed an awful sound, half animal, half metal, all teeth grating. Kimberly cried out and ducked down into a crouch, arms wrapped around her head. Felicity held AIM aloft by what might have been her throat. The actual shape was impossible to make out. AIM kicked and hissed and squealed. I saw hints of what looked like claws, stingers, and rolling eyeballs deep in the shadowy mass. All of it could have been an illusion, a mind ghost one sees in the shapes of familiar furniture and discarded clothing in the corner of one's room upon awakening. Tendrils lashed at Felicity's face. Black drool fell on the arm of her coat, hissing and burning. Feet like bird talons raked at the front of her coat. But she stood and took it all, unflinching and untouched. Then, with a flicker, the lights came back on. Blink blink went the bulbs in Kimberly's bedroom. Chunkwhir went her reanimated computer. Artificial light pushed back the edges of the storm, forcing it outdoors again, into the rain. And AIM vanished like a shadow in the light. Felicity held the pose for another second, staring at nothing, arm outstretched, fingers making a claw. She was truly untouched. All of AIM's tantrum was apparently immaterial, shadowplay and fakery. Then she swallowed hard and lowered her arm, panting and sweating. Tenny and Lozzie peered in at the door, both wide-eyed, Tenny looking mightily alarmed. Rain blew out a breath. I wasn't sure where Sevens had gone. I raised my voice, fearing the worst. Evie. Are you okay? I'm fine. Evelyn called back from down the corridor. That was astoundingly stupid, even for AIM. Zheng bared her teeth. I will rip you from the air, Shadow, she rumbled. There is no hiding in this place, shapeless thing. Apparently there is, Rain said. She moved toward Kimberly, to help her up. But Felicity got there first. Before Rain could reach Kim, Felicity crouched down and took Kimberly's hands in her own. Kimberly's head shot up, surprised and blinking and still terrified, panting and crying and losing control. She looked like she wanted to crawl back into bed and curl up and sleep through the rest of the day. You need to share what she said to you, Felicity said, right to Kimberly's face. Kimberly tried to pull away, but she was weakened by her own shock. And no, please, stop. Hey now Fliss, said Rain, stepping closer, smiling but oh so very dangerous. Let her up. Let her up and step back, yeah. This is none of your business. But even Rain's implicit threat wasn't enough to get Felicity moving. She kept talking to Kimberly, eyes never once leaving that terrified, crying face. Don't let her use it against you, don't let her twist it up inside you. I don't know what she said, but I know it was bad. Whatever it is, however shameful, however horrible, don't let her. Don't. Tell somebody. Anybody. You can tell me right now, I've been listening to her for years. I know. Kimberly was in so much shock I thought she might keel over and pass out right there. Rain was almost on top of them, I could see her moving to grab Felicity by the shoulder and pull her off Kim. Poor Kim's personal space had already been violated by one intrusion today, this was the last thing she needed. But then, Kimberly leaned forward. She was so stunned, so used to obeying authority, that she just went along with it. And deep down I knew it was probably better than the alternative. So I darted out with one tentacle and grabbed Rain's arm. Rain flinched, then blinked back at me. I put a finger to my lips and shook my head. Down on the floor, one woman on her knees and the other crouching, Kimberly put her lips close to Felicity's ear, cupped her mouth with one hand, and whispered a single sentence. She choked back a sob in the middle, but managed to finish. She whispered so softly that even I couldn't hear. I had no right to. Then she rocked back, shell-shocked and drained. That's not true, Felicity said, instantly. Kimberly's face scrunched up. She was trying desperately not to cry. It is. It's not. Felicity snapped in her painful half-mumble, difficult with those lips, it drew a wince from her. Outrage was a strange emotion on her half-burned face. The half covered by burned scars twisted uncomfortably, pulling at the junction between scarring and healthy skin. She tells you lies to hurt you. That's what she does. But it's true, Kimberly whimpered. Her resolve crumpled. She started crying, ugly crying, the kind of crying that one has to either turn away from, or respond to with instant, empathetic comfort. I had to turn away. Not because I didn't want to help, but because Kim was already in another's hands. Rain stepped forward to rub Kim's back. Tenny crept into the room, tentacles reaching for her friend, though unwilling to get close to Zheng. To our combined surprise, Kimberly clung, childlike, to the front of Felicity's coat. Rain and I shared an awkward look. Was this safe? We had no idea who Felicity really was, or if it was emotionally safe to allow Kimberly to reach out to her like this. Felicity herself at least seemed aware of the difficulty. She pulled one of those intensely awkward unsmiles, made even more awkward by the fact she couldn't use her whole mouth. Zheng snorted and turned to look back into the upstairs hallway. Lazi had vanished somewhere, probably to help Preem with Evie. I cleared my throat. This situation is rapidly spiraling out of control, and I would rather that descent be halted right now. Felicity, do you believe our deal with AIM is still going ahead? Felicity nodded at me, deadly serious. I believe she'll honor it. Be careful though. I don't know why she did this. Because she is an awful little shit, Rain said with a snort. I don't need to be told that twice, I said. What should we do about? I nodded down at Kimberly, who was still sobbing softly, not quite all down Felicity's shoulder, but not far off. We should all stay in one place, right? Rain asked. Felicity nodded. Nobody should be alone. Until I leave, at least. Groups of 3, maybe. I sighed and tried not to look as exasperated as I felt. You told us that AIM only shows herself to people by themselves. So what was that just now? Felicity blinked at me several times with her good eye, looking increasingly uncomfortable, her sudden unexplained confidence finally draining away to nothing as the crisis passed. She's never done this before. Zheng grunted. The mewling, failed wizard is too tempting for her appetite. Felicity stared at Zheng, then at Kimberly. Failed wizard? I cleared my throat. Thank you, Zheng. Felicity, I think it's best if you drop that subject. Kim, Rain was saying, rubbing Kimberly's back. Hey, Kim, come on, I'll take you downstairs. Fliss has to head out. And no, Kimberly murmured. No. A high-pitched, throaty gurgle came from down by my left side, familiar but surprising. Sevens had somehow slunk around the edge of the room without anybody noticing. She poked her face around my hip, black and red eyes staring at Felicity, shoulders wrapped in yellow cloak which pooled around her feet. Guyuk, she went. I'll stay up here with these two. In here. Rule of 3. K. Rain and I shared another look. Rain pulled a slightly pained grin. I shrugged and said, it's better than having Evelyn and Felicity in the same room for any length of time. Felicity was frowning at Sevens with the tiniest touch of a look I'd seen on Evie so many times before, cold, calculating mage thoughts of judgment and appraisal. Gao, went Sevens. You don't know what I am, and it's none of your business. I'm just here to watch. Rain clicked her fingers, suddenly serious and calm again. Hey, Fliss. Why yes. Hurt Kim and I'll kill you. Then she smirked. We cool. Bjort, went Tenny, mildly alarmed. Felicity stared back. She blew out a long slow breath, shaking only a little bit. I'm not going to hurt anybody. She just needs an ear. That's all. Good, said Rain. Sevens, call us if anything changes. Okay. I rolled my eyes, but secretly I thanked Rain for making absolutely certain. Right, everybody else to the kitchen, I said. We'll let you know when this is all over. Felicity looked straight at me, and said, good luck. For Evelyn, too. I answered with a thin smile. There was little more to say. 20 minutes later Evie and I waited alone together in the magical workshop, the old drawing room, the location of our much-changed gateway to outside, the seat of power for Evelyn say the mage, the secret at the heart of the house, and the location I kept habitually leaving my squid skull mask. Evie was already in an absolutely foul mood. She had stomped all the way downstairs, barely accepting Preem's help and certainly not anybody else's, looking always on the verge of hitting somebody with her walking stick. I hadn't been able to calm her myself. Rain had insisted that I take the time to shed my wet clothes and change into something dry, which I had done, accompanied by herself and Zheng, leaving Evie to get more and more angry. Now Evelyn sat in one of the chairs pulled away from the large workshop table, half hunched and glowering at nothing, scrimshawed thighbone placed across her lap, both hands planted on the handle of her walking stick, balanced in front of her. "Try not to think about it," I murmured out loud. "Huh," Evie grunted. I didn't have to define what it was. The mere presence of Felicity inside the house gave Evie an expression as if she could taste vomit on her tongue. Perhaps this was Aim's strategy all along, to unbalance Evelyn before the conversation even began. Perhaps all that stuff with Kimberly was just a red herring. We weren't taking any chances on either front. Kimberly was upstairs in her bedroom with Felicity and Sevens, safe as could be. Everybody else was waiting in the old disused sitting room, so as to satisfy Aim's condition of no eavesdropping, though I suspected that at least one person was going to try to sneak into the kitchen and press their ear to the workshop door. My private, unspoken bet was on Zheng. I stood a couple of paces away from Evie, at her flank, occupying the position usually taken by Preem, or the position Rain sometimes occupied in relation to myself. Bodyguard, attendant, and naked blade. Odd to think of myself that way, but this was about Evie, not me. I kept my tentacles spread wide, all except one that was wrapped around Evie's right arm, down to her wrist, to anchor her in case the worst should happen. I cradled my squid skull mask with my own right arm. My left sleeve was pulled back to expose the blocky black lines of the fractal against my sunless skin. All my weapons on full display. I even did my best to stand up straight and look intimidating. I doubted Aim cared about the can of pepper spray in the front pocket of my hoodie, but it never hurt to be prepared. We were not truly, technically alone, not by the strictest definition. Two spider servitors hung in their usual spot in the corner, frozen like statues of black chitin. Marmite was crouched below them, his bony, segmented tentacles drawn in close. He could feel something was approaching, or perhaps he sensed our tension. A little further away from the spider corner, a piece of blue tarpaulin pinned to the wall hid the bucket of possessed clay, which still contained the undefinable demon that Felicity herself had extracted from Evie, months ago now. But this would have to do. Aim would have to accept this. We weren't doing it anywhere else. Aim. I said out loud, into the empty room, after we'd been waiting for perhaps 20 seconds. "We're ready. Are you here?" Storm rain drummed on the roof and windows. The house seemed to press close with protective warmth, as if something was trying to break through from the storm above. Evelyn sighed and looked very unimpressed. I heard her teeth creak as she clenched her jaw. "Feels like a séance," I said. "Are the spirits listening? Is anybody there?" I trailed off and cleared my throat. "We're here, Aim, as we agreed. If you keep messing us around, I shall get quite angry." "She's probably waiting for us to turn the lights off," Evelyn said. "She doesn't like being seen." Hee, came a hissing, grinding fake laugh, like the sound of liquid sulfur boiling away from broken glass, apparently from behind the sofa. "Some of us like to do it in the dark, that's true," said Aim. "I'm so shy." Both spider servitors reacted like they just caught wind of an arachnid-hunting jungle wasp. Two banks of crystalline eyes swiveled to stare directly at the gap between the sofa and the wall. A dozen spike-tipped stingers whirled up into a defensive formation, quivering and pointing. A split second later, both spiders shot across the ceiling, scuttling at high speed. One of them slammed into the far wall, just above the gateway, poised as if to pounce. The other dropped onto the table and assumed a similar pose, just ahead of Evie, pointed back toward the source of the demonic voice. I flinched hard, my tentacles twitching not at AIM, but at the spider's reaction. At least they knew what their job was, senile or not: protect the gate, protect Evie. My flinch made Evie flinch. I sighed and huffed. The spiders reacted, that's all, I said. Marmite less so. Marmite didn't seem bothered by AIM at all, which was quite strange. Instead of retreating, he peered around the side of the sofa with his swiveling cone eyes. Evie slipped her modified 3D glasses on over her face briefly, saw the spiders, and grunted in approval. Then she took them off again and nodded to me. Lights, Heather, please. Are you sure? Upstairs, she. Do it. Do it, AIM hissed, then giggled. I sighed, reached over toward the light switch with one tentacle, and plunged us into the deep gloom of the storm beyond the walls. Thick as tar and dark as oil, these shadows were so much more dense than the ones upstairs, with the curtains pulled tight over the windows. Suddenly I felt my lungs expand, my senses awaken, the pressure lessen on my feet as two tentacles took some of my body's weight. Before our eyes could adjust to the gloom, something terrible crawled out and over the back of the sofa. Shadowy frills, dark scythes of blade or bone, light drinking scales, eyes burning like black holes in a starlit void. Too many limbs, the suggestion of more than one tongue in a 12-inch mouth, and a light, airy little puff of cushions as she landed on the sofa, straightened up, and crossed what couldn't possibly have been a pair of legs. Petite, compact, frilled, delicate, all shadow and indistinct. A gray mass of suggestion that the eyes filled out and the brain turned to monstrous ghost. Anything could have been sitting there in the dark. Hi, purred AIM. The sound sent a shiver of physical revulsion up my spine. Evie Eve. Been a while, crocodile. Evelyn calmly reached over to the edge of the table, where her phone was waiting, and pressed the start button on the timer. Your 20 minutes has started, she grunted, staring back at AIM. Talk. Evie was doing so well, steel in her voice and steel in her spine, but through her jumper and her t-shirt beneath I could feel the slam of her pulse. I could smell the cold sweat on her back. I could hear her muscles creaking. I tightened my tentacle grip on her arm, reminding her that she was not alone before this shade from her past. I bit my own tongue, however angry I was about AIM's assault on Kimberly. To talk over her now would jeopardize the deal. AIM, whatever she was, said nothing. 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. I tried to keep my nerve and not glance at the timer counting down on the screen of Evelyn's phone, but the pressure was too much. 30 seconds had passed and we were just sitting in the dark. Was this part of AIM's strategy too? Then the shadow on the sofa rolled her head from side to side, with a sinuous motion more snake than human. Oh God, AIM moaned. I don't believe it. You're so boring now. The deal is off. What? Evelyn said, dark and angry. Yes, AIM, I'm sorry, what? I added, just to say something to release this awful tension. AIM laughed, a sound like a thing from the darkest pit of hell trying to imitate a girl. I'm not interested in Evie anymore. My butter roll has turned to boiled oats. She's boring now. The deal is off. You may as well turn off your silly timer. What are you timing? How long it takes for you to bore me to death? Evelyn replied, slowly and carefully, with very precise wording. I understood instantly what she was trying to do. AIM was a demon, after all, wasn't she? The deal was for 20 minutes of private conversation in return for completing Felicity's understanding of the necessary magic. You are receiving your 20 minutes right now. This is it. Ha! AIM honked like a goose. We didn't shake on it. Or sign a contract in blood. You want to go small print with me? A clap in the dark, like two hands slapping together. A lady's agreement was all we had, and you are not what I was promised. Evelyn was speechless, staring at the shadow. The agreement was with me, I reminded her. Wait, Evelyn grunted. What do you mean, boring? Aim flopped backward onto the sofa, exactly like a petulant little aristocrat girl. She let out a huge, fussy sigh. Look at you, Evie. You've actually grown up, you're not fun anymore. You've got purpose, you know what you want, and you're honest about how much you love what you love. Where's the fun in any of that? She sat up again, like a roiling darkness boiling upward on the sofa. A chin went into a pair of shadowy hands, shifting and adjusting in the dark. The pose was rather undercut by Marmite peering over the armrest. Aim ignored him. You've got a little lingering guilt about Mummy Dearest, and jealousy over Rain, and you're horrified about that time you tried to kill yourself. I felt Evie go stiff. I squeezed her shoulder and arm, hard. Aim just kept on talking. But those are all scabs. If I pick them, what's beneath? Healthy flesh. What am I going to do, wind you up about your missing leg? What would be the point? You really have come so far. Aim sighed, as if suddenly nostalgic. A grin of dark on dark spread inch by creeping inch. Your mother had no idea what she'd spawned when she gave birth to you. You're worth 10 of her, my sweet chocolate roll. Evelyn swallowed and raised her chin. Talking about my mother is hardly a poorly defended angle of attack. You'll have to do better. Always with the drama. Aim hissed. Always with the touchy nerves. Or maybe you're worried because you're a mummy now too. Mummy Evie with her speed-grown adult daughter. How does it feel to bring a demon into the world? Aim hissed and giggled, a wet and rusty sound. Good, right? A surrogate you can command and control, but you never know what she's really thinking about. I love my daughter, Evie replied, absolutely stone cold. I suspect she is immune to your brand of torture, but if you try, I will do everything I can to murder your body and send you back wherever you came from, deal or not. Yerferg, went Aim. She made a finger-down-throat motion in the dark, then mimed being sick. Strings of black, hissing drool pooled on the floor in front of the sofa. Marmite backed away from that. Mages. Disgusting. Sick. Aim put up several limbs in surrender. Fine, I'll leave your doll child out of this. I spoke up. Preem scared you before and that was only over the phone. She could catch you in person. I don't think you should insult her. Aim looked at me, or at least I think she did. It was hard to figure out what was really going on in that mass of half-hidden shadow, and blew a raspberry at me. PBT. I blinked in surprise. Well. Evelyn sighed. I was not expecting you to act so childish. This is still your 20 minutes, Aim. You are sticking to this deal, or Heather will hurt you. Aim giggled again. You can threaten me all you want, Evie, my little sweet butter roll. My rumbly pumly. My sleepy girl. Aim suddenly straightened up, going still in the darkness. But I want to settle accounts between us. Evelyn went still too. Her tension was contagious. I found myself holding my breath. What trick are you trying to pull now? Evelyn asked. My mother was a vile woman, yes, Evelyn said between clenched teeth. We all know that. Get to the point. Aim grinned, a splash of oil on black paint. Then the grin flickered off again. Felicity was deep in the drink at the time, did you know that? Yes, Evelyn hissed. I know full well she was drunk when she cut my leg off. No, I mean even when she wasn't doing that. Aim did not sound amused. A light bulb went on inside my head. She's an alcoholic? I asked. Aim purred. Not like she can get any booze up in Tannerbaum house. Last time she tried, the forest floor drank it for her. That wasn't a pretty sight. She lay on the ground screaming and weeping for an hour, in a puddle of vodka soaking into the mud. Can't get anything up. There. No smack, either. A shiver went down my spine, a response to the change in Evelyn's tension. She was frowning into the dark. Heroine? Evie asked. A dark nod from Aim, a wisp of shadow and claw waving in the gloom. Oh, I murmured. Oh, goodness. But she's clean now? Evie asked. Another 2 nods. Is that, I ventured, then cleared my throat. Was it safe to ask this? Was this some kind of conversational trap? Is that why it's so hard for Felicity to leave her house? It keeps her safe. Aim did not reply, but carried on speaking to Evelyn, a cold little rumble like gravel in a pool of frozen rocks. You don't have to forgive her. You won't, after all. Not in your heart and not to her face. But stop threatening to kill her, please. Stop making it worse. Evelyn paused, considering. This is what you wanted to talk about? No. Aim burst into a giggle. I already told you, you're boring now. So I may as well tidy you away. I put my toys away when I'm done with them. I'm a good girl. And if I promise to do that, then you'll give her the rest of the spell we need? Emma maybe, purred Aim. Half of it. Evelyn sighed, sharp and angry. You were always like this, you insufferable creature. Stop playing games and name what you want. Dangerous words, Aim said. No blood contracts, Evie shot back. Aim snorted in the dark, an awful sound, more insect than mammal. To my surprise, I felt Evie smile. There was an understanding between her and Aim, something very old and very dark. I couldn't help myself, the curiosity was too much. Aim, how does this line up with what you are? Why do you care about Evie threatening Felicity? You exist to torment Felicity, as far as I can tell. The shadow shape turned toward me again, shifting on the sofa. Dead cold, she said, is that what it looks like to you? We all heard what you did to her on the phone. You abuse her emotionally. A twist of gloom, a tendril or a hand. And you don't like that? It's disgusting, I said. I keep her alive, Aim rasped, voice fading into the dark. Evelyn tilted her head up at me, giving me the floor, letting me take the lead, but I didn't know how to continue. Was Aim misleading us, or being serious? Did she care about Felicity in some twisted, codependent way? Did she tell lies to hurt people, to torment the weak and damaged? Or was she the only thing standing between a friendless, depressed, isolated mage and a slow, pitiful, unmourned death by drug addiction and alcoholism? Why did you assault Kimberly? I asked. That was rude of you. Oh, what am I saying, rude? It was criminal. We should be chasing you out of here. Why did you do it? Aim didn't answer, but I felt the rolling of too many eyes, somewhere over there in the dark. Wrong track. She wasn't going to answer that. I took a deep breath and did something I didn't want to do, especially after she had attacked Kimberly. Aim, I said, forcing myself through the words. When you came here last time, you helped us. You went into that house, the cult's safe house. You put yourself in danger. Thank you. I had half hoped that would send Aim into an embarrassed paralysis of refusal, perhaps thanking such an elementally nasty entity was the weak point in her psyche, human or not. But I was sorely disappointed. Aim shifted on the sofa and seemed to grow half a dozen extra limbs, all wiggling in excitement and burrowing between the sofa cushions. Marmite backed up another few paces, withdrawing his eyes into his head. On the table, the spider guarding Evie stood up higher, making itself look bigger. Aim had shifted modes, somehow becoming more threatening. Evie might be boring now, she said. But I am so much more interested in you, Heather. My blood went cold. No. Evie snapped. The deal was for 20 minutes with me, you. Aim ignored her. I've been thinking all about you the last couple of days, Heather. She drew my name out in wet, bubbly purr. The last time Flissy Poos came down here it was all too much of a panic for me to get ready. But now I've had lots and lots of prep. I've been learning all about you. The storm. I said, breathless with awe. The storm, it was you, I was right. No, it's true, I said, unable to tear my eyes away from Aim, the roiling grey shadow on the sofa. She made the storm, I don't know. I don't know what she is. Something strange and soft was stirring in my chest, a writhing familiarity, a recognition that I could not put into words. Abyssal instinct screamed caution but also curiosity, like I'd caught scent of something moving in the deep. Perhaps it was the artificial darkness, the pressing storm, the shapeless presence of Aim, but I felt for a strange and weightless moment like I was floating in the abyss. Let's talk about you, Heather, bubbled Aim. A tongue flickered forth and licked at her chops, black and dripping. Let's talk about you and your eye. No, Evie snapped, hard and unyielding. Never. Heather, don't listen to her, she's trying to mess with you. What are you? I asked, softly, but somehow louder than Evie's anger. You're clearly not a demon, not like Prime or Zheng. Or are you? Are you what happens when demons develop far enough? But you can't be as old as Zheng, you'd be ancient. What are you? Aim? I asked. What a boring question, Aim drawled. How about no? How about Evie leaves, and we talk about you, Heather? Doesn't that sound like fun? Aim demonic dissembler, shadow silhouette, ineffable imp sat in frozen promise across the imitation abyss of the magical workshop, deep in the dregs of stormlight, drenched in the drumming of the rain, and pressed close by the squeezing of an unseen revulsion, as if the house itself was eager to expel this foreign object lodged in our collective flesh. She had made an implicit offer, if only I would consent to talk alone, about myself. Forget me, I said, staring into that formless darkness. I'm not interesting. I beg to differ, Aim purred in a voice like knives dipped in boiling acid. A voice that made my spine shudder. A voice that made Evelyn go stiff, sitting next to me in the dark with my tentacle still wrapped securely around her shoulder and arm and hand. I squeezed that hand. I'm still here, Evie, you're not by yourself in front of this demon. I cleared my throat. But you just mentioned the eye. I know you did that on purpose, to bait me. I'm not completely naive, not totally inexperienced at this kind of thing. I have bargained with far worse things than you, Aim. Then, because her hook was firmly through the flesh of my cheek, what do you know about the eye? Heather. Evie hissed through clenched teeth. She doesn't know shit. Writhing like seaweed in a dead current, oozing darkness like silty mud, Aim smiled. Almost invisible, a suggestion of widening shadow. Girlish, teasing, full of taboo knowledge and things she shouldn't know. I blinked twice and suddenly understood, abyssal instinct feeding me hidden layers of reality. Aim wasn't really smiling, that was only my brain doing its best to process the nonsense data my human senses were picking up. Aim was like a radio broadcast, more noise than signal. Part of me wondered what I might see if I dipped my senses down into the abyssal range, but I'd not done that in months. The last time I'd attempted that trick I'd been left insensate for several minutes afterwards. I couldn't risk that in front of Aim, not when I had to protect Evelyn. I felt a pull toward her, an urge to get closer, to get a better look at what lay beneath the shadow. But I was anchored to Evie. I know a secret, Aim cooed. About the eye. The words slipped from between my lips before I could stop myself blundering into her game. MMHM, she purred, an oversized house cat full of flaky iron rust and carcinogenic gravel. Dark tendrils rose from the shadows on the sofa, their tips kissing in the still, cold air above her head, like she was touching her fingertips together. You're going to tell me that secret? I did my best not to phrase it as a question. I even considered slipping my squid skull mask on before I spoke. But here in the dark, Aim and I were already equals. I needed no true face. And then you'll honor the deal? I asked. You'll give Felicity the rest of the spell? Sure. A shrug rolled in the shadows. Too many elbows. Why not? I have to try, I said, listening to that tug in my chest. I ached to get closer to AIM. Evelyn sighed with explosive frustration. She fumbled with her walking stick for a second, got a proper grip on the bone wand in her lap, then lifted it to point in the direction of the shadowy mass on the sofa. Instantly, poor Marmite scrambled backward, out of the firing line. His numismatic mind may not have understood the subtle nuances of tension and negotiation, but he understood well enough the business end of a weapon. The spider servitor on the table backed up a few paces too, in a more controlled and practiced manner, giving its mistress room to wield terrible violence. I whipped out a tentacle. Instinct rode me. A hiss tore up my throat and stopped only because I bit my lips hard enough to draw blood. Sharp pain and the taste of hot iron brought my mind around like I'd been slapped. Heather. Evelyn hissed in shock, frozen in my grip. The moment she had raised her bone wand toward AIM, I had lashed out with a spare tentacle and caught the wand in coils of smooth, pale muscle, wrapped it around and around to immobilize the wand in Evie's hand, and then pointed it down at the ground. Despite the useful metaphor, the wand was not a gun. Pointing it away from AIM wouldn't make a lick of difference to Evelyn's ability to use the thing. But holding her hand tight in the tip of my tentacle stilled her fingers from the necessary movements. AIM was not the target of my aborted hiss. Evie was. Horrified and confused, I let go of her arm and hand as gently as I could. I am sorry, Evie. I didn't hurt you, did I? I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. Evelyn stared up at me in the gloom, brow furrowed hard, the soft puppy blue of her eyes swallowed by the static gray. The bone wand was like a floating skeletal apparition against the darker patch of her skirt and the floor beyond. No, she said eventually, hard and cold. I'm fine, thank you. I'm sorry, I murmured. I don't know why I did that. AIM cackled in the dark. She rocked on the sofa, a child having a giggle fit. Pseudopods slapped against each other, making no sound, black mist passing through black mist. Some ally and friend she is. What did you think you were going to achieve anyway, Butterroll? Were you going to dispel me? John D. himself couldn't have come close. Then again, you are so much more than your mother's daughter. If anybody has to put me in a box, I wouldn't mind so much if it was you. Evelyn snorted derision, gritted her teeth, and pulled her composure tight around her shoulders once more with nothing but a lift of her chin. Even half blind in the dark, unintentionally undermined by my instincts, and taunted by a demon, Evie was glorious in her imperious posture. Heather has counseled me in mercy, she said. You should thank her. Oh, AIM cooed, a horrible sound like a crocodile trying to be cutesy. Good save. Believe what you want, Evelyn spat. Heather, don't speak with AIM alone. I think Heathasmoots can do whatever she wants, AIM warbled. I waited for an extra word from Evie, watching her eyes, begging her to say it. She could collapse all my uncertainty with one little phrase. But it never came. And I didn't prompt her. A sensible response stuck in my throat. My hands would have quivered if I'd unclenched my fists or unhooked my arm from around my squid skull mask. My tentacles itched to reach across the room and peel back that darkness from around AIM. I had told a lie. I knew exactly why I had tried to restrain Evelyn, and why I'd almost hissed in her face when she'd threatened AIM. Abyssal instinct recognized AIM as something not unlike myself. A kinship across the cold water. I simply had to look her in the face. Evie, I said, watching AIM. I've debated my own guilt for murder over coffee with the king in yellow. I don't think AIM is going to present much challenge to my self-worth or self-doubt. At the name of the Yellow King, AIM's smile died. I felt it go out like a black hole swallowing itself, leaving behind a field of clean stars. A head twisted and kinked in the darkness, peering at me from one angle, then another, drooling black saliva onto the floor. I watched her in return, my eyes moving from point to point on sheer gut feeling. You want to call my bluff, I thought, but you can't tell if I'm making that up. A high-pitched whine eased in on the very edge of my hearing, like a massive television set left on mute in another room. Focused aim, pressing down on her. Like the house itself was trying to force her out. Evelyn yanked on the tentacle which I had wrapped around her arm, dragging me downward so she could hiss in my ear. I am not leaving you alone in here with her. You'll have to throw me out of the door, Heather. Go on, pick me up and hurl me out there, I'm sure Preem will catch me. I'm serious, I whispered back. I don't think she can hurt me. Why not just rip the information out of her? Evie demanded in a whisper. Across the room, Aim was still swaying from side to side like a piece of greasy seaweed snagged on a nail. She's right there, she's already hurt Kim, and now she's trying to mess with our heads. You said you can do it, were you bluffing? I didn't answer. I just watched Aim. Truth was, I probably could do what Evie suggested, but I simply didn't want to. A very important part of my soul did not want to hurt Aim, at least not in that way. I would restrain her from assaulting my friends if need be, but the idea of doing permanent damage, of vivisecting her with brain math to pull out the wet and dripping morsels from her mind, that was now unthinkable. What I wanted to do was reach across the room and peel back her camouflage. The urge was a physical thing, a twitching in my gut. Not quite hunger, and certainly nothing sexual. A new form of need. A burning need to know, to observe truth, unimpeded by appearance. That, Aim purred at last, wasn't true. Was it? Coffee with the king. A king. A yellow monarch. No, just a book. Silently I dared her to push deeper. Technically I had lied, I had never sipped from the coffee the king had offered me. But Aim didn't know that. What? Aim deadpanned. Evelyn's own exasperation at the mere existence of 7 shades of sunlight, and indeed the entire yellow court, was about to give the game away and ruin my advantage. I jumped in with both feet, in panic, with the first thing that came to mind. If we say that we have no sin, I recited off the top of my head, straightening my back, certain I was going to get the words wrong, we deceive ourselves, and there is no truth in us. Why then, belike, we must sin, and consequently die. We must die an everlasting death. Aim and Evie both went silent for a heartbeat. Raindrops drummed on the roof and the windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Well, Evelyn sighed, I don't recognize that one. Aim lit up like a Christmas tree made of frozen asphalt. Ah! She knows her roots. I have read Dr. Faustus, yes, I said. And Aim, really, you're no Mephistopheles. Confident you're free of sin? She asked. Confident I'm not. Aim cackled. She seemed to get the point. Evelyn was shaking her head, exasperated beyond words. Probably feeling left out. I pressed the advantage, following that abyssal urge down in my gut. Tell me what you are, Aim. What you really are. Then Evie will leave the room, and we'll talk about whatever you want. Evelyn exploded. She actually slapped my tentacle, though not hard enough to hurt. I bloody well will not. You'll have to crowbar me out of this chair, Cur. Aim made a sound of such utter disgust, more lizard than human. Evelyn flinched and I whirled all my tentacles up in a protective cage around her. The shadow on the sofa had gone still, all except for a ragged, rough, shallow breathing. Aim. You people, she purred, dark and wet and full of scorn. You love your definitions so much. You love them more than the world. Your limits. Your carefully demarcated edges. Your words and numbers and things on pages. It's what mages and wizards and the like have been doing for thousands of years. Writing things down in dusty books. Cataloging, describing, defining. Everything has to have a name, a type, a label. And when it exceeds those labels, you all go, oh, this can't possibly be true, this can't be right, wah 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 dot. Aim huffed, a petulant teenage girl turning down a gift that wasn't quite expensive enough. And then you write new definitions, new limits, new types. All of them just as wrong as before. Silence reigned for a moment, filled by the storm outdoors. The shadow on the sofa had turned dense and sulky. Evelyn's palm had gone sweaty and cold on my tentacle. I squeezed gently. She didn't squeeze back. Eventually I asked, "Where are you going with this, Aim?" "Ha! Your ancestors were smarter. They understood that a saint's finger bone could be in more than one place at the same time. Do you? No, of course you don't. The scientific method is only a method. Maybe you need a different method for something like me." "Well," I said, "what are you, then?" Aim reared up, all dark suggestion lost in the gray gloom. I had the distinct impression she was standing on the sofa cushions. "There you go again. With the same thing." "It's not the same thing at all," I said, doing my best to hold my ground and keep my voice steady before this screeching apparition. "I'm asking you for self-definition. I'm not going to test it, or debate it, or write it down. I want to know what you consider yourself to be." The smile crept back at last, a slash in the dark. A forked tongue flickered out to taste the air. "I prefer not to say." "She's just a demon," Evelyn grunted. "She likes to put on a show, that's all. Why does this even matter?" "It doesn't," Aim purred. "Listen to her, Heather. My sweet little raspberry crumble gets it." I couldn't answer either of them. Aim writhed in delighted irritation. Evelyn stared up at me from her chair, fuming in the gray gloom. "Aim," I said after a moment, trying to relocate my footing. "You want a private conversation, about the eye." Evelyn spoke through gritted teeth. "I am not leaving this room." "Then there's no deal," Aim cooed. "I'll just take my leave, shall I?" "Be off then, Toodlepip." I leaned down toward Evie, speaking for her ears only, though I suspected Aim would hear every word even if I only thought them. "Evie, please," I whispered. "I will be completely safe. There's nothing she can touch me with, not after everything lately. What's she going to do? Taunt me about having power? About how I might fail? About what? She can't touch me." Evelyn's face was a gray mask, lips thinned, eyes boring through my skull. "If you want me to leave," she said through her teeth, "you will have to remove me yourself. And we both know you won't do that." Aim let out a dark giggle. "It's for your own good, butterscotch biscuit. Some things about gods aren't meant for human ears." Those words only acted as more bait. My skin itched, my feet wouldn't stay still, I had to know. I wet my lips, trying to bring these two together in some agreement, something that would let me square this circle. "What if Evie stays?" "Then I," said Aim, "go." And so she did. The shadow on the sofa stopped moving, becoming one with the gray background of cushions and curtains. In a moment of optical illusion it was possible to convince oneself that Aim was still sitting there, inhabiting the angles of shadow on cloth, the disturbed fabric of the furniture, the imaginary ghost shapes of shadows upon waking. But then I moved my head and realized there was nothing there. The high-pitched whine had vanished as well. The pressure in the room seemed lighter. My gut and my tentacles both relaxed. "Oh," I sighed. "There goes our chance. Bugger it all." Evelyn spat, stamping her walking stick against the floor. She slapped at her mobile phone on the table, canceling the 20-minute timer and jamming the phone back into her pocket. "Heather, she was trying to entrap you. You saw that, you heard every word of it. Evie, please." I squeezed her arm gently with my tentacle. "I think that was the whole point. You were the one falling into her trap, not me." Evelyn opened her mouth to snap at me again, but then she paused, scowling. "Explain." She knew full well you wouldn't leave me alone with her. So she engineered a situation where you had to override my wishes. She's laying the groundwork for tormenting you later, I suspect, by making you take responsibility for me failing to get what we need from her. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm just projecting, but I think that's what she's doing. And well, I was trying not to give away that I suspected. I sighed heavily. I probably should have just said it out loud. I'm sorry. I'm not actually very good at this, am I? Evelyn stared up at me, brow knitting harder and harder. The rain drummed on the roof and the windows, turning number 12, Barnslow Drive into a resonant cave. The grey gloom seemed now to swaddle us in safety. I wanted to melt down onto the floor next to Evie and put my head in her lap. I don't agree, she said eventually. But you may be right. Fair enough. I let out a weak laugh. You trust me, but you don't trust my judgment. Don't be a fool, Heather. I trust you with my life. She said it so matter-of-fact that I couldn't possibly remain angry with her, but she looked away quickly, back into the comforting darkness of the magical workshop with the lights off. With AIM here the room had felt abyssal and strange, a piece of fairy magic transported to the heart of Sherrowford. But now it was just our home, in the dark. Besides, she's probably still here. Maybe she's a fairy, I murmured. What? Evelyn squinted up at me. Nothing. Forget I said that. Just a silly thought. I blushed faintly in the dark. If she really is still here, then she's probably overheard every word I've just said. I cast my eyes around the room too, looking for a telltale patch of darker shadow, a dripping blackness out of place, a slasher's smile in the night. By speaking her plan out loud, I've already disarmed it. I hope. Evelyn snorted and shook her head, but her heart wasn't in the gesture. Better at this than you think, Heather. No wonder everybody believes in you. You're always so right and... Blurred, came a voice of razor blades and acid, imitating being sick, from the far end of the workshop table. I whipped around, tentacles whirling in surprise, then shooting outward to protect Evie. Evelyn flinched hard, despite doing her best to hide her reaction, then turned in her seat so she wasn't showing her back toward AIM. The spider servitor on the table scuttled around in a little circle, bringing its stinging spikes to bear, each glistening point quivering in readiness to strike. The other spider servitor, clinging to the wall over the gate, looked ready to unfold like a toxin-tipped spring, only a few feet away from where AIM now sat. A writhing shadow of gray and black, indistinct and hazy, perched on the very end of the table. A number of what might have been legs dangled over the side, melting into shadow as they swung back and forth, like a child whose feet didn't reach the floor. The shadow curved, curled, cracked and coiled, then lowered a hand from the suggestion of a mouth. Bleh, AIM repeated. You two are disgusting. Old people in love are disgusting. Don't start making out in front of me, I'll be sick all over your floor. I blessed the darkness, for it hid my rising blush. I opened my mouth on a reflexive denial. What? Low. Old? Evelyn spat. I am 21 years old, you rotten cow. You are infinitely older than me. You were born at 40, AIM purred. Face it, strawberry tart. AIM. I snapped on reflex. All this negotiating and playing games with us and vanishing in a puff of shadow like you're a pixie, that's one thing. But do not insult Evelyn. It's extremely rude. AIM laughed, a bubbly, wet, rotten sound, like her throat was stuffed with decaying cardboard. The shadows seemed to be pressing around her, tight and grasping. That high-pitched whine had returned to the edge of my senses, focused on the figure of the demon sitting at the end of the table, but not originating from her. I felt myself involuntarily inch forward, as if I might grab her and pluck her from her seat. My tentacles itched, drifting outward like a muscular, living net in the darkness, their faint rainbow strobing soaked up by the gloom and returned as mere shades of black. I felt like a hand was on my back, urging me forward. The house itself wanted her gone, and I wanted to catch her like a spider under a glass, not to hurt her, but just to look. Once I was done, we could throw her outdoors, back into her natural environment. You know, said Aim, and then went still, gray, an empty space of shadows. Then her voice came from behind me again, from where she'd sat originally, back on the sofa, hissing with sudden irritation, "TCH. Do not make me repeat myself, it's so boorish. Shooing Evie out is for her own good. I won't talk to you otherwise, Heather. And stop trying to catch me. Don't assume that because it's dark I can't see you trying." Evelyn and I both turned back to the sofa again. The spider servitor whirled as well, looking quite harried by this absurd back and forth. Aim was back on the sofa, a shadow shape of suggestion and suspicion. I had the distinct impression she was sitting up very straight-backed, almost formal. A forked tongue flicked at the air, licked things that were not lips, and then darted back behind far too many teeth. Evelyn snapped, "Stay still or I'll have Preem tie you to a chair." "Oh," Aim mocked. "Scary, scary." But I was shaking my head in wonder, refusing to be misdirected by her words. "You're more like Sevens than a demon. You're a spirit thing, but there is a physical body under there. I can sense it, I can feel it. How did you know I was going to grab you?" I waited a heartbeat, but Evelyn did not add the words I expected. So I leaned down close enough for my breath to touch her ear. "I don't know if Maisie has the time to spare. And I think I can take Aim. But if you insist." I let the words sink in the gloom. Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it again, opened it a second time, then gritted her teeth and said nothing. Slowly, reluctantly, Evelyn stood up from her chair. She used me for support and I gave it freely, taking half her weight as she stared daggers at Aim across the room. Shadow fingers undulated in a mocking wave. "Bye-bye for now, Blackberry Jam," Aim giggled. "If you hurt Heather, I will hunt you down, kill you, and then resummon you to posse's a septic tank on a pig farm." Aim grinned in the dark. I helped Evelyn over to the door. She whispered in my ear. "I promise. I will." When I opened the door to the kitchen, the magical workshop was flooded with lighter gray, stormborn illumination chasing back the darkness. I couldn't resist a glance back over my shoulder, but the shadow was gone. Aim melted away into nothing in the clarity of sunlight, no matter how weak. Only lumpy sofa cushions remained. Evelyn called for Preem. We weren't going to let her walk alone from here to the old sitting room. Even that was too much risk with Aim lurking about. Preem appeared a few moments later, clicking across the kitchen tiles, with Rain dogging her heels. Hey, said Rain, tense and ready, but trying to smile. "We done already? Quicker than I thought you'd be. Everybody in one piece?" Evelyn snorted derision, letting Preem take her arm as I handed her off. "Far from it. Heather is going to talk to Aim, alone." Rain's eyebrows shot upward. She found my eyes and asked, "You gonna be okay?" Just like that. No assumption that I wasn't. No horrified warning. No fear. A genuine question, simply asking if I needed help. I wanted to melt into her arms and kiss her. Rain was perfect. "I think so," I said. Rain nodded, once. "Shout and I'll be there in a flash." I smiled back. "I know you will. Love you, Rain. Love you too, Miss Morel." Just before I started to close the door to the magical workshop, Marmite scuttled out around my legs, eager to be away from Aim. His spider friends did not follow, but Preem greeted him with gentle hand on a passing tentacle. He made for the front room, moving fast. Preem turned her head to me. Blank, milky eyes locked with mine, fixing me in place. "Say hello from me," she said. "Of course," I replied, as if we were discussing a pleasant social visit to a friend, with tea and scones, rather than a negotiation with something dark and horrible, coiled in on itself like a giant snake, that I couldn't even identify. I closed the door on my friends, on Rain's jaunty thumbs up, Preem's blank and elegant stare, and Evelyn's pinched scowl, and plunged myself back into the sucking pit of static gloom. Footsteps clicked and shuffled and stomped away from the other side of the door, across the kitchen, and into the front room. A moment later I could hear nothing over the incessant drumming of the storm. I pressed a hand to the cool, smooth wood of the door, readying myself, then let go, casting off into the abyss. Aim was waiting for me on the sofa. She made no pretense of humanoid form now. A gelatinous mass of shadow squatted on the sofa, impossible to render into details even if I squinted. Octopus-bodied, frog-fleshed, seaweed and salt and sinuous motion, she seemed more abyssal than terrestrial now. More recognizable. More like me. My instincts sang with kinship. Just us now, no human beings to worry about protecting. I felt less human myself. I even forgot to relate Preem's greeting. Aim, I murmured, stepping into the middle of the room, my tentacles floating after me. Aim, what are you? No, don't answer, I know you won't. But I already know. You're like me, aren't you? You've seen the abyss. That's what I call it, the deep dark place between the spheres. I can feel. You're going to die. Aim said it with a sound like ramming a serrated sword through a suit of rusty chainmail. I think that meant she was angry. I'm sorry for undercutting the drama, I said, but is that meant to be a threat? Aim sighed like a terminal tuberculosis patient in her final moments. Why don't we level with each other, Heather? Now it's just you and I, can't we drop all the pretenses? We already have, haven't we? You are what you are, I am what I am. Here we are. I swallowed, heart racing with anticipation, legs itching to move. Aim sat up straighter, or at least higher. The eye. Yes, the eye, indeed, what do you know? Then I laughed softly. Does it even matter? Less than you. So you were lying after all. You don't know any secrets about it. Neither do you, squid brains. And you haven't been paying attention. You've been trying to apply the scientific method to the eye. Like a moron. Building all these models with metaphors: a lost chick, a cuckoo, a protege. An angel. She laughed at that one, a hissing sound. That one might have something to it, I admit. But you're going too slowly. You're going to visit Wonderland. What a shitty, stupid name for a place like that, with a head full of theories and figures, and the eye is going to kill you. I've accepted that danger. I know what we're going to be facing. It's still worth the risk. It's not a risk, she hissed. Aim rose even higher, an octopus rearing up, ready to crack the shell of a crab with her beak. This isn't hyperbole, or a prediction. It's a fact. You're going to die. All your friends are going to die. Your sister will wither away and fade into nothing. It's still worth a shot, I said. Is this meant to make me sad, Aim? I've felt these things my whole life. What are you going to do, huh? Aim leaned forward and suddenly she seemed like a giant, pressing down on me. A teacher, demanding a real answer, not just a bluff and a shrug. A parent demanding an explanation. Reality itself, material and undeniable, demanding an answer with steel upon flesh. I mean, what are you actually, physically, practically going to do? Shout at it? Reach up and stab it with the universe's largest broken bottle? Rain's idea, that one, by the way, at least she had something. None of that makes sense, and you know it. But you've spent months avoiding this, because it's the only method you've got. A lump grew in my throat. That's not true. Then what is your plan? I'm going to reach out to it with brain math. I'm going to try to pull Maisie out. That's what I'm going to do. TCH. Aim hissed. So, fight it. A tug of war for a soul. That's your answer. Waste of thought. Why do you care? Evie will die. No shame, no hesitation, no secret blushing embarrassment. With her and I, alone in the dark, Aim did not balk from the truth. You care about Evelyn? I asked. My tentacles flared outward in silent warning. Faint rainbow glow threatened to reveal Aim's truth, but the shadows refused to take form. I don't think you could achieve that, Aim. I don't think you understand what I am. You don't understand what I am, purred a thing in the dark. Aim coiled and writhed on the sofa for a moment, then said, if I give Felicity this key, you're going to get Evie killed. As soon as I give you this spell, you'll go get that book, and then you're there. And all dead. I won't let Evie get hurt. I would sacrifice myself first. As I said the words, I realized they were true. Would you? Aim laughed. I'm talking with Heather Morell right now. But down there in the dark, you don't have a name. You do know the abyss. I said. You've been there, you understand. And you understand nothing. As I stared across the static gray gloom of the magical workshop, locking eyes with something that had only dark pits where sockets should have been, I accepted that this was not really a negotiation at all. Aim had indeed dropped the pretenses she'd used in front of Evelyn. Her entire reason for coming down here was this private conversation. This confrontation, with me. Perhaps she had planned it from the beginning, but more likely her goals had changed once she'd gotten here. Perhaps the attack on Kimberly had been part of that, to provoke me into reaction, to see if I would leap to the defense of somebody who wasn't even particularly close to me. Aim was judging me. She wanted to know if I was leading Evie to her death. And she didn't like what she saw so far. You're right, I said. When I dived into the abyss, I forgot my own name. But I didn't forget Evie's. Aim said nothing, just floating in a gentle current of cold rain. Evie, Rain, Twill, Lozzie, Zheng, I said their names. Tenny was only a spirit back then. I didn't know Sevens yet. But everyone I knew, I sealed their names inside a pressurized bubble of it couldn't be flesh. But I kept them in my core. It's what drew me back, buoyed me back to the surface. I will always remember the names of my friends, my family, those I've chosen to be with. I don't care what I'm reduced to. Even the version of myself which returned from the abyss, it knows I know that Evelyn Say is part of my pack. Sorry Aim, you're wrong. Aim sighed, dry rubber down a cheese grater. Lucky you. Luck has nothing to do with it. I felt myself edging forwards, toward Aim, creeping across the wooden floorboards on the silent pads of my socks and the supporting curves of a pair of tentacles. Achingly slow, like a cephalopod drifting in dead water, easing myself closer and closer to my target. Tentacles uncoiled from my core, inch by slow inch. An unconscious predatory advance. She was fine, Aim drawled, her rusty razor voice tinged with bitter melancholy. Teeth moved in several places on her blob-like body. She was safe with Rain. She was safe, and alive, and away from her rotten cradle. She was safe, Heather. Maybe not loved, but close enough. You've ruined that. It's not enough to be safe, I murmured into the dark, watching the tendrils of Aim's black form coalesce and melt against the cushions of the sofa. One has to live. Aim hissed, sinking lower, as if she knew I was about to spring. Her attention was turning inward, away from me. I crept closer, sliding my sock-clad feet along the floor. I forgot somebody once, she said, voice reduced to a cold stub. We went down together. He forgot my name, and I forgot his. I came back alone. Me too, I said. I lifted one tentacle in silent, quivering anticipation, a perfect curve of serpentine muscle, poised to strike. Within leaping distance now, and then I would have her. My heart climbed into my mouth, the tentacles supporting my legs went tense. I wet my lips and... Ha! Aim spat from the other side of the room. The shape left on the sofa in front of me was mere shadow, wrought by imagination. I whirled on the spot, tentacles whipping after me, to find Ames standing at the far end of the magical workshop, a dainty little figure of black and grey haze, framed by the outline of the gateway to Camelot, blank plaster and old paint. The spider servitor on self-appointed gate guard duty did not approve of this trick, this traveling without moving. A pair of spike-tipped stingers lanced downward to spear through the top of Ames' head. No! I snapped, flinching forward, about to hurl myself to knock Ames out of the way. But the spider servitor's chitin weapons passed through smoke and shadow and gouged chips of wood out of the floorboards. Recoiling in confusion, the poor servitor almost lost its grip on the wall, head whirring around for the new location of its original target. Ho! Went Ames, now tucked neatly into the far corner like a cobweb. Spicy, spicy doggy. It almost had you, I said, panting with mixed relief and shock. Had she moved again fast enough to avoid the attack, or had the spider's weapons passed through her body and found it no more substantial than a cloud of oil? Ames, what are you? How do you move like that? I finished the quote for her, but where we are is hell, and where hell is, there must we ever be. I shook my head. More Faustus. You do enjoy your literary metaphors. A grin spread in the dark. So do you. Now you're getting it. Getting what? Ames waited in that corner, still and silent, too thin to be a person, too hazy to be real. Bait. I stepped away from the sofa, trying to pay attention to how my weight was balanced. There was no way I could round the corner of the table without her seeing what I was doing. I could leap, I supposed, springing with the power of my tentacles, but this was becoming embarrassing. Instinct thrummed hot and huge in the back of my head, urging me to catch her and peer through the shadows up close, so I could identify her. I pushed it down. I forced a deep breath into my lungs. I drew my tentacles back in. I could not catch her over there, not without making a fool of myself. It wasn't as if I would be able to catch her when she was hiding from all this light, either. I sighed and crossed over to the door which led out to the kitchen. Why had I left it open earlier, when Evie had gone? It was ajar just enough for a person to pass through, flooding the magical workshop with the lighter gray storm-washed sunlight from the kitchen windows. Ames was reduced to little more than a memory in the corner. I shut the door and placed my hand against it for a moment, once more sealed in the abyssal darkness, alone together with Ames. Then I frowned. Wait, I murmured out loud. Wait, I did close. Feeling ill, squid brains. Ames cooed. Slowly I turned and looked at the corner again, at Ames gathered there like oil-soaked rags floating in a marine trench. Had she done something to me just now? Everything felt dislocated, like I'd just jumped back a minute. Or forward. Time didn't add up. But abyssal instinct was silent, unbothered, completely focused on the desire to pluck Ames from her protective shadows. No, that made no sense. I was just confused. I had seen nothing. Ames, I said, trying not to sound like my heart was going at high speed. I never got to thank you for your help against the eye. You went into the cult's safe house for us. You got hurt, for us. I gathered from Felicity that you were injured somehow. I saw you, in fact, if only for a moment. Thank you. I took a step forward, openly. Ames snorted and tossed something that might have been a head, or might have been a pair of crocodile jaws, wrought in shadow. If I had known, maybe I wouldn't have gone in. Your big friend really sees everything. I don't like that, not at all. The eye. I nodded and took another step, making for the corner of the table, making for Ames. I suppose you wouldn't. You're the same. You mean I'm becoming like the eye? A shiver went up my spine, I already knew that. Out in the dream landscape where Lozzie and I had freed Badger, I'd stared back at the eye with what little observation I could muster. A raindrop against the ocean, but both were water. I took another step. And just as trammeled, Ames said. I froze. Pardon me. You heard me, squid bones. I turned that over in my mind. AIM was being cryptic. This was like Sevens, but without any affection or showmanship behind the display. AIM was just being difficult for the sheer fun of it. I stepped past the chair which Evie had been sitting in earlier, reached the table, and placed my squid skull mask gently on the wood. "What do you suggest, then?" I said. The shadow shape in the corner twisted something long and dripping at me. I slid another step closer, along the length of the table. "Against the eye. You're worried that I'm going to get Evie killed because I don't know what I'm doing. So what do you suggest?" A moment of silence and shadow. I pushed into the face of AIM's ire, walking right toward her. The shadows folded away to nothing. I caught myself on the edge of the table, tentacles hooking, grasping, bunching as my feet kicked for purchase, and I turned on the spot, spinning and scrambling in the other direction, shooting back toward the sofa before the shadows had a moment to wrap themselves around AIM's materializing form. But materialize she did, right there on the sofa, already snapping with irritation. "Stop thinking like one of them, Heather. Think like one of us." And then, eep, as I landed on top of her. I plunged 2 tentacles deep into the shadows where AIM was hiding, gripping whatever I could. My flesh tightened around cold slime and ridged scales, around bulging sacs of fluid and dripping orifices. I gritted my teeth and forced myself not to flinch. Rainbow bioluminescence glinted off chitin and scale, slime and salt. AIM kicked and hissed and writhed and bit the air and flailed against the cushions, but all was insubstantial, nothingness on grey gloom. And when my grip was secure, when AIM was held not with terrestrial flesh but by the pneumosomatic truth of my body, I reached back behind me with a 3rd tentacle, and hit the lights. Dull electric illumination guttered back to life, as if smothered by the gloom and drowned out by the storm. Shadows rolled up and scurried behind the furniture. I blinked against the sudden light, a deep ocean creature dredged to the surface. The shape in front of me snapped into focus, grey haze blown away like mist in the morning sun. I recoiled, gaping, mortified at what I was holding. I had one tentacle wrapped around a throat, another looped around a belly, both very human. She was just a girl. AIM was tiny, dainty and delicate. A sprite dipped in coal dust. Dressed from toes to chin in black, she wore thick black socks, shapeless woolen black leggings, a black dress of overlapping layers and intricate lace that reached down past her knees and right to her wrists and up past her throat, cupping her chin with a soft curl. She had long black hair, clean but messy, framing a face of pinched sharpness, all angles and planes. Her eyes were human, with pupils and irises and whites with little veins, but tilted at a fey and inhuman angle. Eyes just a touch too wide. Nose a fraction too sharp. Ears a notch too high. Neck a few inches too long. Something imitating a human being but reveling in the small differences, impossible to ignore. She was maybe 13 years old, but I didn't believe what I saw. I still felt terrible. I felt so bad I hiccuped. I am sorry, I blurted out, loosening my grip on her throat. "I didn't know. I thought you were like you. Convinced me that you weren't remotely human." AIM swallowed as her throat was given space. She looked up at me with heavy-lidded eyes, then smiled with a mouth full of blunt, normal human teeth. Smugging for all she was worth. "Couldn't resist, could you?" She purred. Her voice was still a nightmare, a jarring scratch of knives down a blackboard. "It's in your nature. You want to look, to see, to know." I sighed sharply, blushing hard, then hiccuped again. "I'm sorry for grabbing you. I am sorry for invading your personal space. I thought you were, I don't know, like me. But you did it anyway," she said. "And then you blame me for being the wrong thing. The thing you didn't expect. Too mundane. Too boring. Oh no. Oh dear." She raised her hands and cupped her face, a mocking pantomime of innocence. "I'll have to play it up so you don't strangle me to death." Shorn of her shadows, Aim had the most annoying expressions I'd ever seen. She managed to remain smug while also oozing with fake simpering. Her voice pitched higher, whining, then dissolved into a wet and rotting giggle. I made to withdraw my tentacles, ashamed of myself, confused by the lack of something I recognized. Abyssal instinct had gone quiet as soon as the lights had come up. The real Aim was just a girl. Demon or not, outsider or not, this was her true form, and it was just what I saw. I was certain of that. No, she whined, suddenly grabbing the tentacle I had looped around her belly. I said I'll play it up for you. I can be whatever you want, after all. Aim, stop. I huffed and pulled on my tentacle, but she dug her fingertips in, grinning wider. I'm sorry I invaded your personal space. I was wrong. I thought you were like me, like. But you found the wrong thing when you looked too closely. Yes. I'm sorry. Let me. Aim reared up in my grip and up, and up, and up. Black hair thickening and whipping into dark and ropey tentacles. Face dissolving into a mass of teeth, a circular maw, with eyes the size of tennis balls. Her dress became ridged scales and the rasp of shark skin. Shadows pulsed out from her like membranes in sluggish current. Feelers and roots grasped the sofa and more of them grasped my tentacles. She drooled black, sticky, hissing venom right before my face. Are you sure about that? Aim giggled. I'm only small, after all. Abyssal instinct lit up in triumph, she was like me. And then she was a girl again, sitting on the sofa, grinning at me like a mad little pixie who had lured me into a ring of mushrooms. I stood there for a long moment, panting and shaking, covered in sudden flash sweat. Was that, I cleared my throat and tried again. Was that the real you? You must be from the abyss, you weren't even surprised by my tentacles when you first saw them. You must be. Aim tilted her head sideways and gave me a look like I was being exceptionally slow. Stop asking. I shook my head and pulled my tentacles away. This time, Aim let me go. You just couldn't resist a look, she said. But did it help? Do you understand more, now? No, I suppose it didn't, but. Aim smiled, showing neat little white teeth. And I'm only very small. The eye is so much bigger. I took another step back and realized I was smiling like a moron, trying to get my head around what I was looking at. Aim had been to the abyss, she was like me, I was dying to ask her so many questions, but my mind finally pulled together and started to process her actual words. Logically, I could deduce what Aim was. She had begun as mortal, or perhaps outsider, and then swum the abyss, like me. Had she been a mage, like Uranju, or something else? I almost asked out loud, but that would just set her off again. I might be able to define what she was, technically, but that told me nothing about her. On reflex, abyssal instinct stirred my senses, preparing to see with new eyes. Ah! Aim shot up straight on the sofa, suddenly angry, little face pinched and blazing. No. And no. I blinked, shocked out of the process of dipping into abyssal senses. No. You do that, and I'm gone, I'm out, no bluffing. Turning the lights on, that's all part of the game. But looking like your big eye does? No way. Stop. I took a deep breath, quite deflated by that. You mean wait, Aim, then how am I supposed to understand the eye, if not by looking at it? I sighed and shook my head. This is getting too lost in metaphor. I told you, Aim purred. I don't know. But looking is what the eye does. I opened my mouth to sigh again, then froze, and said slowly, and looking isn't understanding. Aim smiled, a nasty little pixie all in black. Stand still, you ever-moving spheres of heaven. Ha! I laughed without humor. Another quote, wonderful. Irritating me with my own techniques. How am I meant to approach an ever-moving sphere of heaven, then, if I can't make it stand still. Aim shrugged. That's your problem. Rain was right about you, I muttered. Aim lit up. Rainy? Really? What did she have to say about me? Something violent, I hope. That you're a little shit. I cleared my throat. Pardon my language. Lots of people have tried to give me advice on how to handle the eye. Magic, brain math, lesbian threesomes. I huffed at that one. Blind faith, dreams, you'll know what to do when you get there. You're just the latest in a long chain. And you're not helping either. You need to stop thinking like a mage. I'm trying. I huffed, feeling peevish, and stalked away from Aim. The fun was over, abyssal instinct gone sullen, the game ruined by the harsh lesson. Aim was right, I just didn't know what to do in response. I don't know what I'm going to do about the eye, all right? Is that what you want to hear? That I know I'm doomed? That I don't know what to do once I get there? I don't even know where to start. You're right, I'm going to look up at it with brain math and probably die right there on the spot. Thanks, Aim. Aim the coal sprite grinned. You're welcome. Evie was right, I said. I shouldn't have been alone with you. I felt myself buckling inside. Was this Aim's plot all along, to ruin my resolve, to protect Evelyn by stopping me from going to Wonderland? Because it was working. Maybe we shouldn't go, I said past a growing lump in my throat. Is anybody's life worth Maisie's return? I need to believe it can be done. Ugh, Aim grumbled. She rolled her eyes so hard that a real human would have detached both retinas. You liked me better when you couldn't see me, right? Right? You could deal with me then. You don't need to understand something to deal with it. You just need a shared medium. She pulled one corner of her lips up in a sneer, as if this was obvious. Shadows. Or words. Or maths, in your case, but don't try that, you'll get shouted down. It's better at maths than you. I frowned at her, not quite following. A shared medium with the eye. What? I blew out a long, deep breath, and said nothing for a moment. We stared at each other, two things alike in kind but completely different in every way that actually mattered. Aim sneered at me, tiny and delicate and wrapped in shapeless black. I felt stupid and lost. So, communicate with the eye. I said eventually. In some shared medium, whatever that means. I shook my head and wandered over to the table, touching my squid skull mask. Cool bone metal soothed my heart. You go to the abyss, come back, and spend your days keeping Felicity on the straight and narrow. What's the story behind that one? None of your business, nosy Nelly, Aim sneered in a voice like cats destroying a rusty toy mouse. I felt myself sagging inside. Are you going to give us the magic we need then, or not? Aim paused, tilting her little face one way, then the other, black hair hanging down in a messy wave. I don't like you, Heather. But I like this angel thing you're doing, she mused in a lighter voice. Stick with that and maybe we can make a deal. A deal. Ah. I walked over to Evie's chair and wondered if I should tuck it back under the table. I could just take the magic from you. The knowledge. Do it myself. Aim showed me her teeth again, a big toothy smile. Are you sure about that? You don't even know what I am. You're like me. Wrong. Ah. She made a noise like an old-fashioned computer error, grating and metallic. I nodded in exhausted surrender. Preem says hello, by the way. TCH. Aim flicked one bony, delicate hand. She really ought to get your roof fixed. I was up there waiting. Great big holes in the tiles. Tarpaulin doesn't last, you know. You really care about that? Evie could catch cold, she said, then grinned a mocking little grin. Fair enough. I moved to sit down on the chair, this negotiation wasn't over yet and then bumped into something soft and unexpected. My brain short-circuited, like in a dream. I had bumped into something which wasn't there. Something invisible. I had bumped into nothing. I blinked several times. I had bumped into nothing. I had bumped into nothing. Nothing was there. Maybe don't sit down in the chair. But nothing was there. I stood there blinking several times, stuck in a small loop, until an explosive sigh split the air. And suddenly there was Evelyn, my soft and well-wrapped Evie, sitting in the chair where she'd been sitting all along. A piece of familiar white quartz fell from her hand and into her lap, where it dimpled the fabric of her skirt. She looked slightly bashful, blushing, unable to look me in the eyes. I gaped at her. Evie. Aim had a hand over her mouth, eyes wide with amused shock. Evie, I said. That's the stone you used when we first met, to hide in plain sight. What's it called? The Fade Stone, Evelyn replied with a grunt. You lied to me. You came back in. That's why the door was open. Evie. Evelyn looked up at me with blazing eyes. You didn't seriously think I would really leave you alone with her? Heather, I am not letting you hurt yourself. You could have insisted. I squeaked. Evelyn looked at Aim like she was a zombie made of dog turds. And I haven't seen your face in years. What are you still doing here, you little monster? Well, Aim began, wiggling her eyebrows. She never finished the rest of the sentence, because the door of the magical workshop flew open with a bang. Preem filled the doorway, staring at Evie. Ah, Evelyn cleared her throat. Preem. Yes. Well. I'm fine. I'm safe. Sorry. Yes, said Preem, sounding none too pleased. Wait, I said. Preem, she didn't even tell you she was doing this? She didn't tell me. Yes, said Preem. Evie, I admonished. Yes. Aim joined in. Naughty Evie. You. Preem silenced Aim with a single look. The coal sprite demon thing flinched like she'd had a bucket of water dumped over her head, cringing back on the sofa. Evelyn was blushing with embarrassed fury. I didn't know what to say, lost for words. Preem looked like she was about to fetch a rolling pin and beat Aim into mince. Aim came back down from her flinch, inch by slow inch, eyes locked with Preem. Behind Preem, in the kitchen, Rain appeared, peering over her shoulder at me. She shot me a questioning thumbs up. I shrugged, grimacing. Yes or no? Preem said. Aim pointed at herself with a faux innocent me gesture. You, said Preem. Aim hesitated, then smiled, a nasty little thing dipped in black mud and cobwebs. All right then, she said. Go get Flissy. Let's do some magic, ghoulies and girlies.